Gamers of the Underworld. Chapters 181 to 200. Chapter 181. Sherlock's Decision. In the dim alley, two hamsters were muttering excitedly while a third hamster took watch at the T-junction for any intruders. The two hamsters started a fire, then they threw a tiny amount of black powder into the flames. The big boss hamster muttered, "We have to succeed. This is the last bit." The flames turned azure with the prayers of the big boss. Ah! After seeing the flames turn azure, Big Boss and Second Boss screamed out like groundhogs. Fat Otaku, who was taking watch at the junction, came over. The three hamsters opened their eyes widely and stared at the azure flames. A devil's figure appeared from the flames, and a fuzzy female voice asked, "Why did you contact me so late?" "Where's Sherlock?" the three hamsters shouted excitedly. "Lady, we found Lord Sherlock's trail. At Winterfell. I'm hungry, lady." The three black-white hamsters finished speaking in one breath. The azure figure said, "Didn't you report Sherlock's presence in Winterfell the last time?" The three hamsters looked astonishedly at each other before speaking. "Lady, are you sick? Lady, this is our first time contacting you. Lady, have you eaten too much?" Big Boss and Second Boss slapped Fat Otaku. Then Big Boss berated, "How can you say that? Why would Lady overeat? You're the one who always overeats." "Stop fooling around," the figure in the flame replied, and the three hamsters became quiet. Then they looked at the figure who said, "You must have seen Sherlock." "Think. Where was that?" The three hamsters responded immediately. "Impossible. We were in prison. We were almost put to death. It wasn't easy for us to escape. We got to have a good meal." Big Boss and Second Boss looked at Fat Otaku, who immediately shouted, "I didn't eat. Though I would like to." "Check your back skull," the figure in the flame said calmly. The three hamsters lifted their fur and checked each other. Then they licked their claws and continued checking. "Don't groom each other. See if there are traces of mana," the figure in the flames shouted in rage. The three hamsters were dumbstruck. They started checking. On their back skulls were 2 traces of mana. "When were you affected by the mana?" "It's traces of Lord Sherlock's mana. I ate Lord Sherlock's food?" As the three hamsters were in doubt, the blue flames increased in height, and the figure became taller. She looked down at the three hamsters while the three hamsters lifted their heads silently. Then she said, "Seems like you had met Sherlock." "Lady," the big boss hamster pondered for a while and said, "According to our investigation, Lord Sherlock bought a dungeon near Winterfell and became a dungeon lord." The blue flames abruptly extinguished. Big Boss was dumbfounded. Second Boss patted Big Boss and said, "I've told you not to say it. Wait for us to confirm before telling her." Fat Otaku walked over and patted Big Boss's shoulder as he said, "Can we go for our meal?" When Sherlock brought Evelyn back to Eternal Kingdom, he saw a group of gamers carrying wood and waiting outside the carpenter workshop. A few gamers carried processed wooden planks from the workshop. Mufasa's wood processing business had begun. 2 big cauldrons were placed outside the carpenter workshop. The first one was given as a gift when the workshop was built, while the second one was carried back from area number 10. It was used to give Eggface a bath. Both cauldrons were lit with fire, and tens of gnomes were at the sides, adding clay and stirring the cauldrons. The gamers saw that Sherlock and Evelyn had returned. They ran over as they chatted noisily, but only a few gamers surrounded them. "Lord Sherlock, thank you for taking me to Winterfell. I'm very happy. If I wasn't wanted, I would be able to walk openly with Lord Sherlock in Winterfell." Evelyn said with regret, "After the war ends, I'll try to get your arrest warrant dismissed." "It wasn't a serious crime anyway," Sherlock said. "Really? Thank you, Lord Sherlock." Evelyn was almost moved to tears. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Sherlock waved his hand and walked towards the Dungeon Lord main hall. "Lord Sherlock, is your conscience pricking you? It wasn't easy for you to entrap your good brother, sister, and you're letting her go. After the war, are you really going to help her get the arrest warrant dismissed?" "Should I ask, is the arrest warrant a lie?" Brew asked as Sherlock returned to the Dungeon Lord main hall. "No, I didn't lie to her." Sherlock sat down and activated the computer. "There was really an arrest warrant for Evelyn. The reason why I wanted to help her is that I understood why the other bosses wanted to fire her. Besides being a white elephant, her capability is suspect," Brew said thoughtfully. "With her character and capability, it's indeed a headache to bosses." But providing her with food and lodging in exchange for her labor might also be a good idea. Why doesn't Lord Sherlock reconsider? It's not necessary. Our supply of clay isn't sufficient for everyone. Eggface can take over the auction manager post. And Sherlock became silent. Then he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, it's nothing important." Lord Sherlock, why aren't you telling me? I'm your most loyal servant. Can it be that Evelyn has a special trait? Or is a mole sent by your enemy? Bruce said with agitation. Why do you always have strange ideas? Door knocks were heard coming from outside. Please enter, Sherlock shouted, and Yoda walked in. Lord Sherlock, with regards to the decadence in the dungeon, do you have any leads? Yoda asked nervously. No, I don't have any leads. Sherlock propped up his hand and asked, what happened? Chapter 182. Design Blueprint of the Gamers. I only heard occasionally some of the creatures discussing the evil and decadent things. But I'm not very sure, Yoda said worriedly. I understand. I'll monitor the despicable and decadent citizens closely. Are there any other matters? Yoda walked forward and took out a blueprint. He said, I spent 2 days to create a draft of the airship design blueprint. Most of the contents were created while I was in Winterfell, participating in the airship design. Please take a look. Yoda passed the blueprint to Sherlock. Sherlock took the blueprint and turned it around as he tried to figure it out. Yoda was at the side explaining. Sherlock's first reaction was, the blueprint was crude. Perhaps Sherlock was used to the quality construction blueprints drawn by the gamers, the various detailed game maps on the forum, and the excellent large furnace design blueprint. It's not bad. You may go to the Mana Engineering Project Hall and discuss it with the citizens of Eternal Kingdom. To construct a functional airship, how long will it take? If you're able to prepare enough magicians to repair the airship magical core and provide construction assistance, it can be completed in 20 to 30 days, Yoda said. It's not difficult to construct an airship. The most difficult part is obtaining the magical core. I understand. I'll let you handle it. Construct the airship within the shortest possible time. Sherlock nodded. Yoda bowed to Sherlock and left with his blueprint. Yoda walked towards the Mana Engineering Project Hall in the industrial area. Though it was called the Mana Engineering Project Hall, the site was still being excavated. There were many gamers who were excavating diligently every day. To a newly developed dungeon, with that many achievements within a short period of 3 months, it was a remarkable feat. When Yoda arrived at the excavation site of the Mana Engineering Project Hall, a group of gamers had gathered. Yoda thought that being the new Mana Engineering mentor, those gnomes, goblins, and houndhead men would stand up as a show of respect when they saw him. They must be interested in Mana Engineering, just like the apprentices of Simba, who were interested in blacksmithing. But Yoda was wrong. The gamers surrounded him and chatted enthusiastically. He's here. The engineering mentor NPC is here. Veteran Hemp Rope, what did the mission description tell you? Yes, what did it say? While chatting, the gamers gave way, and a goblin walked out. This goblin was different from the other armed creatures. He didn't have any equipment except for the bladders hung from his body. Wait, bladders? Yoda was dumbfounded when he saw the goblin, who said, this game is too realistic. We did a mission and brought back a Mana Engineering mentor. Yes, I received a mission saying that you can help us repair the airship. We have done the preparations. The blueprint is ready. The goblin pointed to the wall behind him. Yoda felt strange that the behavior, appearance, and voice were exactly the same as the courageous goblin who had sacrificed himself in the war. He looked at the wall pointed out by the goblin. On the wall was a detailed and strange-looking schematic of a huge airship. Yoda felt dizzy looking at the various lines and numbers. Though he didn't understand quite a bit, according to his instinct and professional experience, this was a high-quality design blueprint. What is this? Who made it? Yoda swallowed hard. Hemp rope technology was taken aback. He didn't expect the NPC to ask such a question. Yoda said immediately, no, I'm not able to understand the airship blueprint. I have to admit that the blueprint is very good and detailed. As for practicality, I have to discuss it with the designer. The designer isn't here, he's on the forum, Hemp Rope Technology said. Forum? Yoda didn't understand what a forum was. Veteran, what forum are you talking about with the NPC? This game is about authenticity. Not wearing pants reminded us many times in the strategy guide. Let me try. The gnome burning chest hair walked over and said, "Respectable Master Yoda. This blueprint was created by a faraway, wrong. It was created by a group of creatures. A lot of information is confidential, so it isn't convenient to tell you. Our hemp rope technology understands the blueprint, so you may discuss it with him." "Ah, I see." Yoda was puzzled, but he roughly understood. Hemp rope technology walked over and held Yoda as he said, "We completed the blueprint and obtained the basic materials, but we don't have welding tools or spare parts." The mission said, "Wrong. I heard that your mana engineering skills are able to help us solve these problems. I admire your powerful mana skills. I'll discuss the detailed portions of the airship. This is the most advanced design using aerodynamics." Yoda started discussing the technicalities of the airship with the gamers. Winterfell Defense Area Number 1. Numerous gnomes, orcs, and werewolves held different flags as they charged towards the ancient god's army, which was like a torrential wave. After half a month of battle, the Merchant Alliance of Winterfell collaborated with all independent dungeons to form an Underworld Alliance army. The Alliance army had defeated the ancient god's army at all defense areas except Area Number 1. This area had the largest portion of the ancient god's army. It was also the last defense area that had access to the time and space vortex. Beefballs stood on the command platform, watching the battlefield with a firm gaze. Behind him, a communication troop brought a letter with an order. Beefballs read the letter, then he put on his armor and raised his big axe. He said to his troops, "Let's go. Before the end of the day, we have to take down Area Number 1. Prepare the troops. Let's charge." Chapter 183. Prepare well. It was another day in Eternal Kingdom. All citizens worked extremely hard. The tall Lord Sherlock put his hands behind his back and walked in the dungeon. Little Fairies, or more appropriately Raintea's medicine concoction platform, was completed 3 days after Sherlock returned to the dungeon. The medicine concoction platform was placed next to the teleport portal main hall. The dungeon was currently designated with the Dungeon Lord main hall area, living quarters area, warehouse area, commercial area, industrial area, and guild area. Each area was in development. Sherlock was planning the mana area for mana-related activities. For example, the medicine concoction platform, alchemy platform, and magical items workshop were to be placed in the area. The location was behind the teleport portal main hall. To excavate the mana area required quite a bit of time. After surveying one round and seeing the gamers working diligently, Sherlock was relieved. He went to the Mana Engineering Project Hall in the industrial area. It was an empty space with all sorts of messy materials. They were currently constructing the dragon bone structure of the airship. According to Yoda, once the structure was completed, the remaining tasks were easier. The dragon bone structure was made of expensive adamantine ore. Sherlock glanced twice and looked away. That was his magic stones burning. Sherlock returned to the Dungeon Lord main hall. Before he activated the computer, Winterfell Seasonal Digest was delivered via the flames. "This must be Brainiac's newspaper? I feel Brainiac is a very good employee," Brew said. Sherlock didn't respond. He started reading the newspaper. As expected, there were tons of advertisements. To celebrate the Merchant Alliance's total victory, all daily necessities shops are offering a 1% discount. Once in a century opportunity. Don't miss out on it. After the discount, a 10 magic stones item cost 10 magic stones. Oriental Magician College is offering the latest controversial crystal ball product, Find Your Soulmate. To discover your soulmate, use the Find Your Soulmate crystal ball. If you spend a magic stone, you will get to see the birth scene of your soulmate. If there is no indication of any scenes, we are not scamming you. This means you don't have any soulmate, ha 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 ha. Free tour. Free tour. A free tour without having to bring any of your magic stones. Jewelry shops, restaurants, magical items shop, underground nursery, over 100 shops waiting for you to tour. Remember to bring your magic stone card. Opening of Noble Hairstyling Salon. Perm your favorite bald head. If you top up your member's card, you will have 3 free hair perming chances. Sherlock looked through all the advertisements, but he wasn't interested in any. He looked at the news in the small column. Total victory. The teleport portal of ancient ruins number 85 is being sealed. Eternal Fire had excellent contributions to the victory. We are honored to interview the frontline commander Beefballs. The content of the interview is as follows. Reporter. Greetings, Commander. I am a reporter of Winterfell Seasonal Digest. Can I ask you a few questions? Beefballs. I am busy. Please be quick. Reporter. Do you want me to censor the content? Beefballs. It's not necessary. Reporter. We know that Commander Beefballs is an outstanding general. How did you lead everybody to win this war? Beefballs. My family has been supporting me. I looked at photographs of my wife and my unborn daughter to think of those genius tactics. Reporter. I see, Beefballs is a family guy. Can we take a look at the photographs? Beefballs. Of course. Here. Reporter. Picture. Wah, is your wife giving birth soon? Beefballs. Yes, my wife is giving birth soon. Reporter. Are the war remunerations high? Beefballs. The remunerations cannot be compared to previous times. Reporter. Ah, what is that ring? Beefballs. I intend to give it to my lover. Reporter. What do you have to say to the ancient god's army? Beefballs. Your lives are like the dying candles in the wind. Reporter. Thank you, Commander Beefballs, for today's interview. We shall end here. This is the content for the Seasonal Digest. Sherlock put down the newspaper as Brew said, Tisk, tisk, tisk. I'm in favor of this Commander Beefballs, but since he was reported on in the news, he won't live for long. I don't understand what you're saying. Do you think that the ancient god's army will make a comeback? Sherlock activated his computer and browsed the forum. Though I think that there is no chance of that, Lord Sherlock, if the war ends so soon, we won't be able to cut the trees at Underground Forest Number 3, Brew said with regrets. We've just cut the trees for a few days. I was thinking of leveling the forest to a plain. When Winterfell asks us, we'll say, what forest? Isn't this a plain? The idea's good. Sherlock nodded and said, however, if we cut too many trees, Winterfell won't stand back and do nothing. What shall we do? Lord Sherlock, are we giving up the forest? It's a pity. Sherlock didn't reply. A fire lit up in the air, and a letter was spat out. Sherlock picked up the letter with the words, to Lord Sherlock of Eternal Kingdom, Winterfell Dungeon Lord Office. Respectable Lord Sherlock, we are now at the closing phase of the war against the ancient god's army. Victory is confirmed. To express gratitude to Lord Sherlock and your warriors for the courageous sacrifices and brave fights, we prepared a sumptuous banquet for all of you. Please kindly attend our night banquet 15 days later. At the same time, we have prepared a generous amount of food which will be delivered to your dungeon. Love from the Merchant Alliance. The envelope had other benefits cards, discount cards, and shopping cards. The Merchant Alliance seems friendly and civil. Who does Lord Sherlock intend to bring along for the banquet? Shall we prepare? Brew asked. Indeed, we have to prepare well, Sherlock said as he pondered. Chapter 184. New map for the battle campaign mission. In a room full of Marvel Comics posters, a blind monk figurine from League of Legends was placed on the table. A youth opened the bedroom door and walked in. He threw his black school bag to the side and entered the gaming capsule, which was beside the bed. He closed the gaming capsule and pushed some buttons. Then his awareness was channeled to the gaming world. Logging in. Character. Sealhead Ling Chong. Race. Houndhead Man. Confirm to proceed. A Houndhead Man opened his eyes and sat up on the empty ground. He had the words, Sealhead Ling Chong, above his head. Beside him, a gnome said miserably, my father got me to build our house in the village. After that, I became very skilled. This game is too hardcore. I'm an otaku, but I can build houses. The gnome threw his shield on the ground, and another gnome said happily, I obtained full marks on my math exam. I told my math teacher that I learned mathematics by playing games. He thought I was kidding. Don't talk about it. After playing this game, the knowledge that I gained is more than what I learned in school. A few gnomes were chatting while Sealhead Ling Chong shook his head to clear his mind. Then he took out a packet of clay from his backpack. He ate while he strolled outside. The house occupied 200 square meters. The first level was completed. There was a sign that said, Springfield Flower Kindergarten, on the door. Take a spear hit, Dragonborn. Sealhead Ling Chong shouted twice but didn't get any response. He walked along the surrounding wall to the back of the house. A few darting birds were secured to a horizontal wooden beam, which was buried deep into the ground. Sealhead Ling Chong made choo-choo sounds and took out clay powder that was ground and mixed with the marsh inkspewer's special recipe from his backpack. He placed the powder underneath the huge beak of a darting bird. The darting bird noticed the feed and immediately screeched, "Bye, bye." A long tongue with barbs rolled the powder from Sealhead Lingchong's hand to its stomach. After several times, the darting bird screeched contentedly. Shaw. The darting birds at the sides started screeching hungrily. Bye. Then there were such sounds. Shaw. Bye. The sounds were heard repeatedly. Bro, can you stop playing with the darting birds? I'm at my wit's end in regards to the malice of the game producer. The gamer in the house shouted. Sorry, I'll stop playing with the bird. Sealhead Ling Chong heard the shouts and apologized. Two gnomes who were behind him ran to him. Gosh, Seal, you're back. Hurry, take a look. Take a spear hit pulled Sealhead Ling Chong and shouted. What's up? Sealhead Ling Chong was taken aback. Take a look at the veteran's airship. Take a spear hit pulled along Sealhead Ling Chong and Dragonborn as they ran to the Mana Engineering Project Hall. The Mana Engineering Project Hall was surrounded by the gamers. A large and cool-looking airship could be seen beside the project hall. Holy cow, they've built a Gundam! Sealhead Ling Chong exclaimed when he saw the sight. In the banquet hall of Winterfell, while the gamers were watching the airship in Eternal Kingdom, rows of servants were arranging various foods on a long table in the banquet hall. A few sludge monsters were wiggling along, using their bodies to clean up the area. Beast put his hands behind his back and stood in the middle. He said to the gnome butler, who was recording his words, Lord Octopusball is a VIP. He's the representative of Eternal Fire. Please take note of that. Yes, Senior Beast. The gnome said as he recorded down the details diligently. And arrange for more red tea at night, Beast said. A werewolf butler came over and said to Beast, the dungeon lords are starting to arrive. The Winterfell dungeon lord would like you to entertain them. I got it. Beast adjusted his clothing and walked out briskly. In a reception hall outside the banquet hall, tens of the dungeon lords or their representatives gathered for a reception. Beast surveyed the surroundings, but he didn't discover the creature that he abhorred. Then he walked over cordially and greeted the dungeon lords warmly. While the dungeon lords were attending the victory banquet, Sherlock was in Winterfell but not in the banquet hall. He walked alone in the dungeon lord main hall. Lord Sherlock, today is the victory banquet. There are lots of delicacies in the banquet hall. Instead of eating, you're wandering in the dungeon lord main hall. Is that appropriate? You could have brought along servants, but you didn't. I'm unable to understand. Brew was puzzled. I only wanted to confirm certain matters, Sherlock replied and held his cane as he wandered in the dungeon lord main hall. He walked into a room and said, I found what I intended to find. In the room was a locked chest. Sherlock walked to the chest. A mana seal flashed on his hand, and the chest opened. A weak and thin orc was in the chest. There was a bad stench coming from the chest. Beast, why is the son-in-law of the dungeon lord locked in the chest? Who is that orc outside? Was Lord Sherlock already aware of it? Brew asked in surprise. No, I didn't know. I followed the murmurs of the ancient gods here, Sherlock said casually. When I was young, I learned some useless stuff. I didn't expect to be using it. When I was in Winterfell with Evelyn, I heard the faintly discernible murmurs. I thought I heard wrong. Wait, are they the murmurs of the ancient gods? How did that happen? Without the time and space vortex, the powers of the ancient gods can't possibly reach here, Brew spoke bewilderedly. Who knows? Sherlock shrugged his shoulders and turned around. A werewolf with red eyes was standing behind him. Brew, let the Gama's airship take off. You'll guide them here. Arrange for more creatures. Inform Brainiac to set up a rune mana formation on the airship. It's the same one that I set up previously. He should already be proficient. Sherlock walked towards the abnormal werewolf, who charged at him. He grasped the werewolf's head and buried the head into the wall. The werewolf became motionless. Sherlock dusted his hands and shoulders as he walked outside. The difficulty of the battle campaign map is going to be much higher, Sherlock said. Chapter 185, Winterfell's Battle Campaign Scenario. At a location near Eternal Kingdom Entrance Number 3, a large airship with the style of a ship was moored near Entrance Number 3. Rows of gnomes, houndhead men, and goblins checked their equipment. Then they transported the equipment from the warehouses to the airship's storage cabins. Gather. Board the ship quickly. Not wearing pants stood below the airship and shouted to the gathering gamers. Their constructed airship was much larger than the previous one that appeared on the battlefield. The lavish gamers used up all the adamantine ore in Eternal Kingdom's warehouse to construct the dragonbone structure of the airship. As an ore with excellent mana conductivity, when it was used to construct an airship, the space and capacity were much larger. Winterfell wasn't stingy. Winterfell's airship was small because it was able to satisfy the requirement of an airborne fortress. With tens of magic cannons, the airship was able to have a suppressive effect on the battlefield. The requirements of the gamers were different. The air transportation tool had to be as big as possible. The gamers were gathering to board the airship because they received full service missions half an hour ago. Mission title: Murmurs of Winterfell, Single Battle Campaign Scenario. Mission description: Lord Sherlock discovered an unspeakable secret. The ancient gods may have infiltrated Winterfell. Warriors, the Underworld requires your help. Mission objective: activate the airship and navigate to Winterfell under Bru's guidance. Complete the series of missions. 1. Look for Brainiac and convey Lord Sherlock's order to create a rune mana formation on the airship. It will be used for revival. 2. Ensure the safety of Brainiac. 3. Ensure the safety of the airship. 4. Transport the resources and equipment, as indicated by the system notices. 5. Proceed to Winterfell. Mission reward: to be arranged by Winterfell after the mission, assuming Winterfell still exists after the mission is accomplished. Mission tips: please reduce the number of deaths and bring more equipment. During the battle campaign scenario, you are unable to return to Eternal Kingdom to revive. All gamers who board the airship will be using it as the revival location until the end of the campaign. You may not be able to return to Eternal Kingdom for a few days. To the gamers, this was a battle campaign scenario mission with many benefits. The gamers profited immensely from the two previous scenes, Area Number 10 and Underground Forest Number 3. Now it was Winterfell's turn. Winterfell had been a strategic dungeon that was mysterious and bustling with commerce. They didn't expect Winterfell to be a scene for the battle campaign scenario. With the opportunity to visit Winterfell and obtain many rewards, the gamers had no reason to miss this battle campaign scenario. Most of the gamers boarded the newly completed airship. It wasn't even tested for reliability. The airship flew rapidly towards Winterfell from the entrance number 3. In the interior of the airship, the crowded gamers were packed like sardines in the airship. Even after using adamantine ore to expand its capacity, it was still a huge strain to carry almost 2,000 gamers. Brainiac stood without emotion in the crowd, indifferent to the pushing and squeezing. Yoda was at the helm, enjoying the new, unusual smooth feeling of control. Though the gnomes, goblins, and houndhead men were ignorant of the airship-related mana and mana skills, they were extremely helpful in creating the dragonbone structure, cabin arrangement, creation of a control helm, and the empennage. Yoda, how long are we going to fly? Veteran Hemp Rope, who was draped with bladders, asked. Half a day. The speed of the airship is fast. Yoda shouted. Wah, you call this fast? I can travel half the globe within half a day. Why didn't you study the map? You're making us stand for so long. I hope that we don't stay like this for half a day. I want to go up. I'm regretting this. I want to go to the deck. DMN. Other online games drain money, but this game drains my time and health. Can I spend money to purchase time? Can I open the cabin door? Gosh, don't open it. If you do, we're all doomed. The large airship flew towards Winterfell in the commotion made by the gamers. In the banquet hall of Winterfell, different dungeon lords or representatives of the nearby dungeons were socializing cordially when a gnome with a fake Onionhead mask walked in. That gnome was Dungeon Lord Onionhead. When the dungeon lords noticed Onionhead coming in, they stopped their chatting. Welcome, dungeon lords and representatives. Thank you for attending the Winterfell Victory Banquet. Without your assistance, Winterfell wouldn't be able to defeat the ancient gods' armies so easily. Let us toast to the Merchant Alliance and the Underworld. Onionhead raised his wine glass happily and finished the red tea within. The dungeon lords and representatives followed Onionhead and finished their red tea. The banquet hall became rowdy again. Nobody noticed a faintly discernible gray mana engulfing the entire hall. On the main street of Winterfell, The inhabitants of the underworld were unsuspecting of the calamity that was about to befall them. With various significances, 3 hamsters hid in an alley. Big Boss sprawled on the wall and looked around for any Winterfell garrison guards. "How long are we going to hide?" Second Boss asked sadly. "Wait for Our Lady. We cannot afford to be thrown into prison again." Big Boss said quickly. "Wait, I seem to smell a strange odor." Fat Otaku shouted as he cleared his nose. Chapter 186. Hamsters in the Sewer. In the Winterfell Dungeon Core main hall. Grey mana seeped out from the Dungeon Core main hall, and a few of the guards who were standing guard were depressed. A gnome who dragged 2 buckets of unknown contents came over. His eyes were radiant. "Mealtime, mealtime," the gnome shouted as he dragged the buckets in front of the guards. "Gosh, why did you come so late? We're famished. The next shift is late." "Why isn't the next shift here yet?" the guards complained as they gathered and started eating. As the gray mana grew, nobody took notice. "What's happening?" An orc looked in a daze at the Dungeon Core main hall and asked, "Is someone setting a fire inside?" "I don't know." The other guards were curious. They walked to the Dungeon Core main hall and opened the main door. A teleport portal was slowly manifesting in front of the Dungeon Core. A large rune mana formation appeared at the bottom of the teleport portal. "Quick, inform the Dungeon Lord," a guard shouted. The gray mana had already engulfed everyone. 3 hamster ran on the streets. Fat Otaku was leading in front, sniffling. "Just straight ahead. The odor is very close." Big Boss and Second followed Otaku closely behind. The 3 hamsters ran to the entrance of a cafe. "Ah," Fat Otaku looked like he recognized something. "Are you hungry?" Big Boss walked to Fat Otaku's side and asked in his helium voice. "I'm indeed a bit hungry." "No, that's Lord Sherlock's odor. He walked past here not long ago," Fat Otaku said confidently. Second Boss went over and leaned his nose towards the door as he sniffed deeply. The door opened, and a box of food was thrown out. A sludge monster shouted, "Don't stand at the entrance and obstruct my business. Go to the side and eat." The 3 hamsters grabbed the food immediately and kowtowed to the sludge monster. Then they walked to the side. "No, it's not the time to eat. Let's continue to look for Lord Sherlock," Big Boss shouted abruptly. Fat Otaku finished half the box of food like a tornado. Then he sniffed with his full cheeks, pointed in a certain direction, and shouted, "That way." In the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. The large and luxurious Dungeon Lord main hall looked serene and harmless from the outside, but a gray mana was filling up the hall insidiously. The mana brought along tempting murmurs, and it came from the Dungeon Core main hall. Half of the Dungeon Lords who were gathered in the Dungeon Lord main hall had collapsed. Even Dungeon Lord Onionhead had collapsed. Only the orc who looked like Beast was standing in the shroud of gray mana. The orc ensured that all the Dungeon Lords were in a deep sleep. A few orcs and werewolves with luminous red eyes were standing outside waiting for him. "A few are missing," one of the orcs said. "There are 2 missing guests according to the list. Alexandria and Sherlock." "It's all right. These 2 superior devils are insignificant in the presence of the Heavenly Father. Quickly transfer the Winterfell Dungeon Core. This will be the descending location for the Heavenly Father," the orc with Beast's appearance shouted to them. "Yes." In the dark tunnel, the smell of burnt torch lingered in the air. This was an abandoned sewer of Winterfell. Sherlock walked stealthily in the sewer. Only the sounds of a scurrying hamster were heard running towards Sherlock. Sherlock squatted down and gave a fruit to the small hamster. Then he extended his finger and massaged his small furry head. The hamster made z, z, z sounds before running off with the fruit. Sherlock stood up and continued walking along the sewer. "Can Lord Sherlock understand what the hamster is saying?" Brew asked, puzzled. "Due to some reasons, I learned a bit. A few months back, some creatures invaded their home and were busy excavating the surroundings," Sherlock said as he walked. Following the scent of the burned torch, Sherlock came to a dead end. A simple mana mechanism. "It seems like someone was excavating underground. Isn't Winterfell aware of it?" Brew said sarcastically, "A careless dungeon core with poor capability, unlike me. I obtained all information for Lord Sherlock. If you're taking credit for your achievements, put them aside for now." Sherlock examined the dead end. Then he heard rapid movements behind him. We're being followed. The shadows of 3 hamsters darted in the dim sewer. Fat Otaku was in the front while Big Boss and Second Boss followed closely behind. Why did Lord Sherlock come to such a place? Big Boss asked curiously. I don't know. Second Boss shook his head. Fat Otaku was sniffing with full focus, searching for the scent. The 3 hamsters walked along the sewer until they arrived at a dead end. The scent of Lord Sherlock disappeared. But this is a dead end. What shall we do? I'm famished. I can't pick up his scent. The 3 hamsters panicked. Then they heard movements behind the walls of the dead end. The walls of the dead end started distorting like the tentacles of an organic creature. Then it separated and a few orcs and werewolves came out. They looked different from normal orcs and werewolves, more wretched looking and with deep scarlet eyes. The 3 hamsters hugged together in fright. Their instincts were to turn and flee. When they turned their heads, however, they saw another group of orcs and werewolves. Chapter 187. A Passionate Superior Devil. The 3 hamsters looked forward and backward. They were trapped. Big Boss straightened his fat body and shouted, "No matter what you're doing, recruit us. We can do many things." Second Boss said, "I'm very sensitive to mana." Fat Otaku stood up and said, "I can eat a lot." Those orcs charged towards them. Boom! Ruptured rocks fell with a loud boom as the walls of the abandoned sewer cracked open. Dust that looked like smoke filled the sewer. A tall figure appeared between the hamsters and those strange orcs and werewolves. After the dust settled, the 3 hamsters could see clearly who that figure was. A half-giant's body that was motionless, and beside the half-giant stood a man in a tuxedo. Dust settled on the man's shoulders and peppered the exquisite tuxedo with small speckles. "Lord Sherlock, we're saved. I can eat." The 3 hamsters shouted at Sherlock. Sherlock also noticed the 3 hamsters and was taken aback. He said, "Why are you here? Weren't you executed?" "Lord Sherlock, we escaped from prison. We didn't commit any crimes. The prison meals were delicious." The 3 hamsters shouted again. The 3 hamsters wanted to say more, but the current situation was not ideal for chatting. Behind the ruptured wall, a cloaked man walked out. Behind him was a huge wiggling figure. A large python followed the cloaked man, its bright red forked tongue emitting frightening hissing sounds, and its black pupils gazing at the hamsters as though they were delicious desserts. The cloaked man made hissing sounds as the large python wiggled its body and edged close to Sherlock. The python ignored the 3 hamsters as it raised its head and bared its sharp fangs. Shucks! The large python bit at Sherlock, but before the fangs touched Sherlock, a black figure charged and knocked the python against the wall. It was a black goat. The sharp horns penetrated the python's head and pinned it on the wall. Bright crimson blood flowed down the goat's horns, and the sewer was filled with a chilling stench. Aiming a sharp spear coated with bile at the night howling Hades' hound and spreading death as you walk. He who possesses the strength of Samael, since when did you start helping the ancient gods? Sherlock looked at the man in a long robe. Superior devil, aren't you scared when you invoke the name of Satan? The long-robed man quivered strangely, and his body continued to expand. All of you decadent superior devils have long forgotten about the glory of the devils. Your act of aligning with order is more disgusting than those white-winged angels. The voice of the gray-robed man became more irritable. The cloak's cape was supported by a flat head. He had sharp teeth and a long, slender, scaly neck. The gray-robed man was transforming. Before long, a large python appeared before Sherlock. This was a python that was too large for a black goat to deal with. Sherlock raised his hand to call back the black goat. Then, he somersaulted and sat on the back of the goat. The 3 hamsters leapt on the goat and grasped Sherlock's clothing tightly. The black goat ran fast in the sewer with the speed of a Hades horse. The abandoned sewer quivered with the movements of the huge python, and hissing sounds reverberated in the sewer. Sherlock lay prone on the goat's back. Darkness wasn't his obstacle. Faint quaking came from underneath his legs. He pressed on both the goat's horns and stopped it from running. Right after, a large python broke through the ground and spat its forked tongue as it hissed and narrowed its eyes. "Lord Sherlock, let loose your killing mana. We are becoming its food." Sherlock wasn't in a panic, but the 3 hamsters behind him were screaming in fear. The black goat started running as the large python charged wildly behind. Sherlock gazed in a certain direction and maneuvered the goat. They reached the end of the sewer, which was the way to the outside. The large exit was blocked by a metal grill, but to a superior devil, it wasn't an obstruction. Sherlock raised his hand, and the metal grill distorted as though a hand was grabbing it. Then it was pushed out, and Sherlock charged to the desolate grounds outside. Behind him was Winterfell. The large python charged out behind as its massive body crashed and damaged the sewer. Sherlock didn't continue running. He stood his ground as though he was waiting for the snake. The large python came out from the sewer. It had a 100-meter long and incredibly powerful body that made the ground quake with a slam. The large snake gazed down at Sherlock, then it bit at Sherlock. Sherlock raised his hand and clenched his fist, hammering on the head of the snake. Boom! The snake curled up in a bundle. The great force landed on the snake's head and made the snake crash against the wall. Cracks that looked like a tortoise shell started appearing on the wall. Then there was the booming sound of the wall's collapse. The large snake became motionless. Half of its face was missing, and the smell of blood permeated the air. Is Lord Sherlock bald-headed? 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and 10 kilometers of running daily. Aren't you a passionate baldy? Brew asked and then said, No, I'm not insulting you, I'm complimenting you. I don't understand what you're saying. Sherlock dismounted from the black goat. The goat shook its head in a daze and bleated, then looked angry and ran off. The three hamsters weren't surprised by Sherlock's actions. They gathered around Sherlock as though they were looking for protection. Above their heads, they heard faint rumbling sounds as a large shadow was cast on them. A large, strange airship appeared in Sherlock's view. The three hamsters gaped in astonishment as they gazed at the airship. They were impressed by the airship rather than Sherlock's defeat of the pythons. Brew, record the location. Let them transport the snake back. It's going to last egg face for a long time, Sherlock ordered. Yes, Lord Sherlock. Wait, you let them fly the airship here just to transport the large python? The airship is crowded. It can't carry such a large python, Brew said with regret. No, I didn't know that there was such a large python in Winterfell. Sherlock frowned and pondered without saying a word. The large bat wings behind him extended out, and the three hamsters climbed up his clothing to his shoulders before Sherlock flapped his wings and flew towards the airship. Chapter 188. Very good luck. The three hamsters were sprawled on Sherlock's shoulders. The great wind velocity made the fur cover their faces as Sherlock flapped his wings and got close to the side of the airship. The gamers at the cabin windows discovered the flying Sherlock and the dead snake below and started shouting. Even Sherlock was able to hear the chattering of the gamers in the airship. Shirley looks cool. Gosh, I want to play the role of a devil. Install the devil race for us. How about becoming a devilish person instead? What's up with the large snake? Is that a boss station that we have to fight? Please give way, I'll operate the magic cannon. Forget it, there are only 3 cannons. Let's see who's lucky enough to get the cannon operation mission. Sherlock arrived on the deck of the airship. There was nobody on the deck as the gamers were in the cabins. Only Yoda was on the deck controlling the helm. To prevent gamers from falling off the airship, I used the missions to have the gamers stay in the cabins, which are large enough to accommodate 2,000 gamers. Brew saw Sherlock's doubts and explained. Let them out, we've arrived at Winterfell, Sherlock ordered. A commotion was heard from below. Give way, we are to go to the deck. I'm opening the door lock. Shucks, don't step on my toes. Who's tired of living? Who touched my buttocks? That's hilarious. Are there perverted fools in the game? Wah, pom, pom, pom. In the commotion, the sound of the gamers banging on the cabin door was heard. The 3 hamsters who had climbed down Sherlock's shoulders were frightened and ran back to his shoulders. The cabin door was knocked open. Pom, pom. Dragonborn felt his shoulders almost breaking as other gamers knocked on him. He didn't know whether he was lucky or not. He was the closest to the cabin exit. Though he was the first to get out, he was being squeezed quite pathetically. The only good thing was that he didn't feel any pain. If he was squeezed like that in reality, he would have screamed in pain. Dragonborn was knocked out of the cabin. He saw Shirley dressed in formal attire and 3 unfamiliar black and white hamsters resting on Shirley's shoulders. Dragonborn was taken aback. Was the clothing of the NPC a bug? This was a battle campaign map. Was Winterfell not in danger? As a dungeon lord, why was Shirley dressed that pompously? Ah, those three hamsters were the strange encounter NPCs. Big Boss, Second Boss, and Fat Otaku. The gamers at the side shouted as Dragonborn considered the senseless questions. Dragonborn recognized that those three hamsters were the strange encounter NPCs that Not Wearing Pants and the veteran gamers met at the Gladiator Arena. Later, Not Wearing Pants and the veteran gamers received very good rewards for the strange encounter mission. I know, Lord Sherlock, can you assign me the strange encounter mission? The gamers behind him charged out and shouted, give the strange encounter mission to me. I'm close to Shirley. I know Shirley's fixed surveillance routes. The other gamers were pleading for the strange encounter mission. The three hamsters looked at each other in a daze. Who were they? How did they know them? What did they want? The three hamsters looked uncomfortable. Once most of the gamers had arrived on the deck, Sherlock used his dominant aura to restrain the gamers. Then he said loudly, heroes of the Underworld, Winterfell is in danger, and the lives of the inhabitants are at stake. You are immune to the murmurs of the ancient gods and the mana influence. We have to find Winterfell's dungeon core and rescue it from the clutches of the ancient gods' army. Sherlock waved his hand and pointed at Winterfell. Let's advance. Citizens of Eternal Kingdom, help me take care of these three hamsters. Sherlock placed the three hamsters on the ground. They were a bit puzzled as they looked at the quiet crowd, not knowing what to do. Sherlock extended his devil's wings and leapt off the airship, gliding towards Winterfell. Once Sherlock left, the unrestrained gamers surrounded the three hamsters excitedly. The situation was out of control. Because the hamsters were too cute, some gamers started feeding them. The hamsters observed the various foods provided by the gamers. Though the food was mainly clay, it was better than being hungry for the past few days. A mission appeared in the minds of the gamers. Create a temporary stronghold in Winterfell and look for the dungeon core. That was the mission. The main character for carrying out the mission was the previous Winterfell mana engineer, Yoda. As a mana engineer, he was most familiar with the location of the dungeon core. The gamers looked for Yoda to pick a suitable landing spot. Yoda was worried about a problem. I'm worried about my family. I don't know how they're doing. The despicable ancient gods' army, they actually attacked Winterfell. How did they do that? The eyes of the gamers lit up with excitement. Where's your family? We'll rescue them. A few gamers were talking indiscreet. We encountered the strange encounter mission at the beginning of our battle campaign. Our luck is very good. Chapter 189. How did I become the adjutant? An airship was moored at the empty land in the outskirts of Winterfell. The large dungeon gate of Winterfell was just ahead, though Winterfell was now shrouded by grey mana. The scene was strange. If there were other underworld inhabitants nearby, they could probably feel the chilling murmurs. The gamers had different feelings. This game modeling is awesome. Gosh, Winterfell looks cool. When will Eternal Kingdom have the same grandeur? Probably have to wait until open beta. Did you obtain the screenshots? The scenery of Winterfell from the sky is cool. Pants already posted on the forum, and you're asking for screenshots? The gamers chatted excitedly as they construct their temporary base. They were carrying rocks and laying them in a circular formation to demarcate the base. Some gamers set up the cauldron and lit it with fire. It was simple cooking. The gamers had learned cooking from Mufasa, so it wasn't a problem. It was sufficient to feed the 2,000 gamers and prevent starvation. Except that the gamers had to work harder to prepare the meals. They had to remain in the base and couldn't go to other places. Many gamers were yearning for such jobs. In online games, every gamer wanted to show their worth and be given a chance to be prominent. Instead of joining the endless battles, being a unique chef was also a good choice. Yoda stood at the camp area and looked at the 100 warriors who volunteered to help him find his family. Yoda would like to follow them, but he was the only one who could operate the airship. The most important thing was that the gamers wouldn't agree to let him follow. Yoda was an important character who had to be protected. If he was killed by monsters, would that not be a big loss if the mission failed? Yoda had no choice since the gamers were determined. He had to depend on the gnomes, goblins, and houndhead men to find his family. The 100 warriors had the words, Pioneer Alliance, above their heads. They left to look for Yoda's family. The veteran gamers set out as guild members. They followed Yoda's map and walked towards the luxury mansion of Yoda's wife. For the gamers who didn't receive any mission, they stayed at the base to await orders. Without missions and rewards, why would they want to waste their time? They were better off staying in the base and participating in the future gameplays of the battle campaign scenario. The gamers had made a wise choice. Not long after the airship landed, a group of creatures advanced towards the gamers' camp. The first gamer who saw them shouted noisily to inform the rest of the gamers. Besides a few gamers who wandered off to seek adventure, most of the gamers gathered to watch when they heard of a group of NPCs approaching. Sherlock wasn't at the base. Brainiac was a specter who didn't care about Winterfell, while Yoda was just employed by Sherlock and felt he didn't hold an important position in Eternal Kingdom. Moreover, he was only an employee. The gamers waited for a long time, but there was no leader who came out to meet the NPCs. So the gamers waited enthusiastically at the base entrance to meet the NPCs. It was a group of well-equipped orcs who were in disarray. Seeing the state that Winterfell was in, it was understandable to see the Winterfell creatures in disarray. Where are you from? Are you the reinforcements? Aren't all the Underworld units stationed at the time and space gap of Ancient Ruins number 85 to fight the Ancient God's army? The pathetic orc spoke rapidly. Then the gamers responded noisily. The troublesome Ancient God's army. After this war, I'm going home to get married. We came from Eternal Kingdom. You thought we were reinforcements? We are Dio. Will there be a team to trigger the strange encounter mission? Where did you come from? The orc looked at the group of creatures with green words above their heads. The goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men were spouting nonsense. Wait, houndhead men? Why was there such a chaotic race? The orc became tense, and the hundreds of orcs behind him became wary and grasped their weapons. The gamers looked on excitedly. Was it going to be a fight? The equipment on the orcs looked powerful. Before they fought, the gamers received a mission. Mission title: Cooperate with the Winterfell orcs. Mission description: If Winterfell is destroyed, it will not be beneficial to Eternal Kingdom and Lord Sherlock. Cooperate with the orcs to save Winterfell. Mission reward: After the end of the battle campaign scenario, the Merchant Alliance will disperse the rewards. The gamers started discussing things with the orcs after they received the mission. The situation became messy. Wait a moment. While the gamers were making a racket, a group of gamers started shouting. We are your allies. Don't fight. Calm down, everyone. We have to arrange for a representative. We can't hear anything in this commotion. I propose myself to be this representative. Why am I not the representative? The group of gamers became noisy again. The three hamsters ran over and captured the gamers' attention, and the gamers became quiet. The orcs saw that the gamers had become quiet. Then they looked at the three hamsters. Though they were wary, the surrounding gamers didn't attack. There was a huge airship moored ahead with the magic cannons aiming at them. Could bandits have such equipment? The three hamsters came to join in the fun, but they didn't expect everyone to look at them. Are the three of you the commanders? Are you the reinforcements? The orc asked again. The three hamsters were puzzled. They had just arrived and didn't know anything. I'm not. Big Boss shook his head. I don't have. Second Boss shook his head. Would you like to have some clay? Fat Otaku carried a pile of clay and asked the orcs. The three hamsters weren't commanders. The orc shouted again, it doesn't matter what you're doing, flee for your lives. Winterfell has been corrupted by the ancient gods. The dungeon core is now the power source for the Chaos Ancient Gods. We're informing the Merchant Alliance. This place will become an abandoned dungeon. The orc became depressed. The gamers started to discuss excitedly. This plot's awesome. After making a strategic dungeon, Winterfell is going to be abandoned? Every NPC has such an intelligent conversation system. The resources used are immense. So what if it's going to be an abandoned dungeon? Shall we salvage items from the dungeon? Is the development team running out of money? I want to see a Winterfell with millions of creatures. The orc looked at the gamers who didn't understand the severity of the situation. He shook his head and intended to leave with his comrades. When he was about to leave, a skeleton and gnome walked forward. They were Brainiac and Yoda. Beside them were a few gamers who received missions, which were to find Brainiac and Yoda and convey Sherlock's instructions. When Sherlock wasn't around, Brainiac would be the highest commanding officer and Yoda his adjutant. Yoda was bewildered. How did a mana engineer become an adjutant? Chapter 190. The AI interactivity is great. I understand now. Brainiac looked at the orc, and Brainiac's face showed that he understood. That is to say, the murmurs of the ancient gods came from the dungeon core main hall? Yoda asked. Some gamers spoke. Shall we occupy the dungeon core main hall? The airship can do that with the magic cannons. Wait, will the battle campaign scenario end when the magic cannons fire a shot? Gosh, please don't. I haven't entered the dungeon yet. The gamers started making a ruckus again. The murmurs of the ancient gods have corrupted the entirety of Winterfell. Did you see the gray mana mist? Once you encounter the mist, you will be trapped in the nightmare. To occupy the dungeon core main hall is impossible. Even if you use the magic cannons, they aren't able to harm Winterfell as it has an anti-mana shield. Without the Merchant Alliance's approval, nothing can penetrate the shield. The Winterfell orc said with a doomed expression. Moreover, there's a group of ancient gods believers who guard the Dungeon Lord main hall, which you have to enter to shut off the shield. Winterfell is doomed. The Merchant Alliance's army will come and destroy this area. Since the army hasn't arrived, leave quickly. We are seeking reinforcements. The orc left with 100 of his comrades. The emotionless Brainiac returned to his post as though nothing had happened. Yoda sighed and gazed at the nearby Winterfell. Then a group of figures ran forward. They were goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. Wait a moment. Why are you entering Winterfell? Yoda looked bewildered at the fearless citizens of Eternal Kingdom. We are raiding, wrong. We're saving Winterfell. A gnome shouted as he ran into the distance. The gamers obtained a new mission. Mission title. Shut down the Winterfell anti-mana shield. Mission description. To allow the airship to have a precision strike on the dungeon core main hall, you have to shut down the anti-mana shield. Occupy the Dungeon Lord main hall. Follow subsequent mission instructions to complete the mission. Mission reward. Winterfell will provide the rewards. Mission tips. In Winterfell, there are lots of underworld traitors and corrupted ancient gods believers. Please operate in groups. The gamers started forming their groups. Dragonborn, Sealhead Ling Chong, and Take a Spear Hit formed a team as they advanced towards Winterfell. Dragonborn had been to Winterfell before, so this was his second time in Winterfell. Previously, he traveled via the teleport portal. This time, he walked in through the dungeon gate. The feelings were different. For all the gamers, it was a new experience to be in the huge Winterfell. It wasn't accessible previously, but it was now open to the gamers in this battle campaign scenario. It was dead quiet in Winterfell. The gray mana pervaded the entire dungeon. All the inhabitants of Winterfell were unwittingly controlled by the murmurs of the ancient gods and trapped in an endless nightmare. In the teleport portal main hall, the teleport portals were now controlled by the orcs, gnomes, and werewolves whose eyes were emitting red brilliance. Only devout believers of the Chaos ancient gods weren't affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. After they controlled the teleport portals, the first thing they did was to change the coordinates of the destinations of the portals. Then countless ancient gods believers streamed out from the portals to occupy Winterfell. A tall werewolf was the commander of the corrupted believers. He was called Cruel Malevolence. He looked at Winterfell, which was pervaded by the murmurs of the ancient gods. More and more ancient gods believers walked out from the portals behind him. Previously, they could only struggle with their existence in the underworld. Soon, the situation would reverse. The great ancient gods would make use of the Winterfell's dungeon core to open the bridge between the underworld and the time and space dimension. They would construct a gigantic teleport portal that could allow the ancient gods to descend in this world. The evil underworld should have the look of an underworld. What had the underworld become? Order? Peace? Commerce? Going to work? Employers paying salaries? Even gnomes could become dungeon lord? What a joke. It should be a world dominated by the ancient gods from millions of years ago. It should be in chaos, with a strict hierarchy of status, and governed by the strong over the weak rule. That was the real underworld. And I, Cruel Malevolence, will be the new superior devil with the help of the ancient gods. These current superior devils who are dumb will be disposed of by the changing times. The more he thought about it, the more excited Cruel Malevolence became. He envisioned himself having a dungeon and becoming an evil superior devil with the help of the ancient gods. His entire body was covered in green, pus-filled blisters, and he had a pair of bat wings. He would have unlimited power provided for his use. He saw himself massacring others on the battlefield. Those decadent New Age devils knelt on the ground to plead for forgiveness. After conquering the underworld, he, cruel malevolence, would lead his innumerable ancient gods' army and attack the surface world and the high almighty heavenly kingdom. He imagined the beautiful life in the future until a group of green-skinned figures appeared in his sight, a group of 10 gnomes. The gnomes were all equipped with various weapons and armor. What was that, comrades? Cruel malevolence was taken aback. He raised his hand and beckoned his ancient gods' believers not to be rash. The group of gnomes also stopped in their tracks when they were 30 meters away. He could hear their conversation. Gosh, there are monsters here. Don't attract aggro. Let's go and get more gamers. Wait for me to grab some screenshots. Gosh, this scene is way too cool. There, that creature looks like an elite team leader. I'm nervous. Don't you panic. At most, we'll die. Haven't you died before? Don't die. It's not easy for us to salvage good stuff. There are lots of motionless guards. The equipment is more than enough for you to salvage. The group of gnomes chatted enthusiastically. Then some gnomes ran over while some ran to cruel malevolence's side. One shouted and said, "Let me attract the aggro of the boss to see if I can get the alias, Train King." His other gnome comrades shouted as well. "Shucks, you lousy dog, don't sabotage us. Run, DMN, we won't form a team with you next time." Cruel malevolence looked at the well-equipped gnome who had strange green words above his head. He was relaxed and turned to his comrades and shouted jovially, "This is hilarious. You'll flee while I get a taste of the ancient god's army's power." In close proximity, that gnome unsheathed his weapon, which looked common to cruel malevolence, and then hacked at him. The short sword hacked on the breastplate of cruel malevolence, but the sword didn't harm the armor at all. The gnome was stunned and said, "Gosh, the armor defense is so high? This is confirmed a small boss." Cruel malevolence strangled the gnome single-handedly. To do so, he even had to bend his back. Cruel malevolence lifted the gnome up. He was sure that the gnome wasn't an ancient god's believer. "Your world will be completely cleansed by me, you scumbags," Cruel malevolence said with a malicious smile. He thought that the gnome would cower in fear, but the gnome's face was red from the strangling. He said with pleasant surprise, "Gosh, the AI interactivity is great." Chapter 191. Enemies Attack. Cruel malevolence was infuriated by the gnome. He applied pressure and broke the gnome's neck, then threw the body to the side. "Capture them. I'll interrogate them." Cruel malevolence was curious why these gnomes weren't affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. These scumbags who had no respect for the ancient gods should be trapped in the nightmare after hearing the murmurs of the ancient gods. Only true believers weren't affected. Therefore, he wanted to capture these gnomes and interrogate them properly. These gnomes ran fast, but they couldn't outrun werewolves. Many werewolves pursued the gnomes. The gnomes saw that they couldn't escape, so they scolded their dead comrade before unsheathing their swords and engaging the werewolves that caught up with them. The gnomes were quickly killed by the werewolves. Only 3 gnomes survived, and they were full of blood and grotesque wounds when they were captured by the werewolves. The 3 gnomes were Leather Bear, Demon Realm Evil Kiss, and Very Normal Researcher. They were placed in front of Cruel Malevolence, after which, they started chatting. "I should have followed the guild team. I won't follow the random teams in the future," said Leather Bear, who was bleeding profusely and had a broken arm. "Leather Bear, don't be angry. We won't form a team with that silly dude." Another gnome said, "We were sabotaged this time. Could that guy be from the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance Guild? The more you mention it, the greater the possibility. He must be from the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance to create trouble for Leather Bear." "Enough," Cruel Malevolence roared, furious that he was being ignored. He gritted his teeth and growled. Cruel Malevolence gazed fiercely at the 3 gnomes and asked, "You pathetic scumbags. What devious ways are you using to negate the nightmare effects? Tell me quickly so that I can give you a painless death." Cruel Malevolence was very furious and threatened them. He expected them to cry and plead for mercy, but one of the gnomes' Very Normal Researcher shouted, "Gosh, what's the situation? Am I being interrogated by the AI?" Another gnome said, "That's interactivity. It may be a strange encounter mission." Leather Bear said excitedly, "Really? The enemy AI will provide a strange encounter mission? Am I that lucky? What do we do? Do we defect? I don't know, let's see what the werewolf says. The three gnomes disregarded cruel malevolence and chatted. Cruel malevolence reached out and grabbed Demon Realm Evil Kiss. He bared his fangs and bit on Demon Realm Vulcus' neck. After tearing his neck, Demon Realm Evil Kiss became a bloody mess. Then, he remained motionless after being thrown to the ground. Very Normal Researcher lowered his head and looked at Demon Realm Evil Kiss, who was covered in grotesque wounds. He thought deeply and asked, how did this game pass the censorship board? Stop spouting nonsense, otherwise, you'll end up like him. Cruel Malevolence interrupted their chatting. He grabbed a gnome and asked, tell me, how did you negate the effects of the murmurs of the ancient gods? Negate the effects? Perhaps because we're the heroes of the underworld. We're the chosen ones, the gnome shouted. He was thrown to the ground after his neck was broken. Only Leather Bear was left. Cruel Malevolence grabbed Leather Bear, who thought about the immersive nature of the game as discussed by the veteran gamers in the forum. In order to propagate the plot, she had to pretend to be a native in the game. She replied, that's Mana. I don't know Mana. Mana? Perhaps it's a superior devil? Cruel Malevolence muttered, and Leather Bear shouted, yes, yes. My dungeon lord is a superior devil. Shirley, no, he's Lord Sherlock. The ruler of Eternal Kingdom. Sherlock? I've never heard of that name. How many of you? Cruel Malevolence asked. About 2,000. We're making camp outside the northern gate of Winterfell. Leather Bear was afraid that Cruel Malevolence might kill her, leading to the strange encounter mission being lost, so she divulged the information. Hee, only 2,000. You're overestimating your abilities, Cruel Malevolence said sarcastically. Then he ordered his subordinates, bring 1,000 troops and destroy their camp. Soon, the werewolves and orcs left in the direction of the northern gate. Wait, is there anything I can do to help? Are there any rewards? What are you doing in Winterfell? Where is the boss? Give me some information? Leather Bear asked nervously. Pitiful scumbag. Cruel Malevolence grabbed Leather Bear's neck. He slowly applied pressure as he loved this kind of torture. Then he said slowly, we'll occupy Winterfell's dungeon core. Then, using it as our base of operation, we'll set up teleport portals for the real Ancient Gods army to arrive in Winterfell. The time and space gap was a distraction, all of you were fooled. Our target was the Winterfell dungeon core. It's too late for you to know because you have no chance to destroy the rune mana formation at the dungeon core. Unless, Cruel Malevolence enjoyed the slow death of Leather Bear. He said happily, unless you swallow the entire dungeon core of Winterfell. But that's impossible, ha ha ha. Cruel Malevolence broke Leather Bear's neck and threw her to the side. Cruel Malevolence looked in another direction. Another group of green-skinned gnomes appeared. When they saw the scene, they turned and fled. Capture them, Cruel Malevolence ordered his subordinates. He was excited about having more targets for torture. In the airship that was moored at the camp located outside the northern gate of Winterfell, a gnome, Leather Bear, revived at the rune mana formation. She immediately shouted, prepare. 1,000 ancient gods believers are coming. They are well equipped. The condition for winning the battle campaign scenario is to swallow Winterfell's dungeon core. Who can do that? There were only about 500 gamers left in the camp. They panicked and were in chaos, and a few of the gamers quickly went offline. I'll post on the forum to get reinforcements. Gosh, let's organize our defenses. The enemy is attacking our camp. Let's call the guilds for help. There will be deaths in the plot, don't panic. Magic cannons. Prepare the magic cannons. The gamers started discussing strategies for the impending attack. Finally, the guild leaders decided to push aside their differences and collaborate for this battle campaign scenario. They would settle their differences back in Eternal Kingdom. Everyone agreed to cooperate. Previously, it was impossible for guilds to work together. The feuds of the guilds were like grievances caused by the killing of their fathers. The guilds could be friendly yesterday and be enemies the next day. From there on, it was only the daily killing of each other. All the guild leaders would also spend lots of money to buy houses in order to raise their guild's reputation. But the game, dungeon, was different. The scenes and missions were all one-time affairs. If the battle campaign scenario failed because of the guild's differences, then all the gamers would be offended. A single player didn't have any influence, but if a guild offended the rest of the gamers, then the guild wouldn't be able to survive in the game. Everyone reached a common agreement rapidly. Then the gamers returned to the camp quickly while the gamers at the camp started building the most basic defenses. Chapter 192. The Highest Priority Mission. At the Winterfell temporary camp, Dragonborn dragged a large pile of equipment noisily as he ran towards the camp. He followed the Springfield Flower Kindergarten Guild to Winterfell to salvage equipment. After running halfway, a gamer shouted, "Check out the forum." Dragonborn browsed the forum and saw a post by Leather Bear. Ancient Gods believers are attacking the camp with 1,000 troops. They're very well equipped. Everyone, please hurry back to defend the camp. Though he wasn't sure of the details in her post, Dragonborn quickly left the forum and ran back to the camp once he saw the title. Fortunately, they weren't far from the camp since they were salvaging near the dungeon gate. There were many sleeping garrison troops with pikes and axes that were very good weapons. Especially the pike. This kind of a weapon with a long handle was very rare in Eternal Kingdom. The gamers were unable to appraise the weapon's attributes and qualities. They thought the weapons looked awesome and carried them back. They would be able to check the attributes at the rune mana formation on the airship. For example, Dragonborn ran back to the camp and stood on the rune mana formation to appraise the equipment on his body. He used some reputation points and coins to check the attributes. Winterfell Standard Pike, green excellent equipment. Damage 0 to 20. Weight 20. Durability 5. Forger. A Winterfell blacksmith who doesn't want to be known. Item description. Winterfell's Standard Pike has good damage ratings and a large attack radius, but it's not good for very close combat. Equipment requirement. Dungeon. Eternal Kingdom Reputation Level 2. Winterfell Garrison Guard Captain's Long Sword, blue superior equipment. Damage 0 to 30. Weight 20. Durability 10. Forger. A Winterfell blacksmith who doesn't want to be known. Item description. The weapon of the Garrison Guard Captain. The quality is very good. Equipment requirement. Dungeon. Eternal Kingdom Reputation Level 3. Most of the armor was for the orcs, so the armor had to be reforged to be used. Their quality was very good though. Dragonborn changed his weapon and placed the salvaged equipment from the garrison troops on the airship. Then he followed the gamers to the front of the camp to defend against the first wave of attack from the Ancient Gods believers. It wasn't the first time the gamers participated in this troop battle. Though they were badly beaten at area number 10, they had progressed from random charging to the current troop formation. Though the formation was ugly, with clustering, their killing efficiency would be higher. The gamers didn't want to die and revive repeatedly. Who didn't want to have an enjoyable game experience? Only a small number of gamers liked to be killed. There were gamers who were carrying equipment at the dungeon gate and running back to the camp. The gamers were occasionally summoned back on the airship. Then they ran half-naked to the cabin to equip themselves with new equipment by paying reputation points and coins. They were the gamers that ventured deep into Winterfell and were killed. The 1,000 Ancient Gods believers whose eyes were shining with red brilliance charged from the Winterfell gate. A battle between the Ancient Gods believers and the gamers was about to begin. In a large manor at the outskirts of Winterfell, Not Wearing Pants and his group completed the mission assigned by Yoda. Then they accepted a new mission. The details were as follows. Greetings. We're not bandits. Your husband, Yoda, assigned us to find you. Where are your 31 kids? Winterfell isn't safe. Come to our camp for your safety. What? 20 of my kids are in the Winterfell kindergarten. I have to save my children. Don't worry. Give this mission to us. Right. What are the rewards? Winterfell is very dangerous, and it's not safe for us to enter. If there are no rewards, it's hard for us to risk our lives. I can provide magic stones. Is 100,000 magic stones enough? I can give you the magic stone card without a secret code. Ding. Congratulations on triggering the hidden mission, No Mother's Request. The priority is the highest. Please complete this mission first. After completion of the mission and submission of the magic stone card, everyone will be rewarded a blue superior equipment and a purple legendary equipment. Gosh, we'll set out now. Do you have pictures of your kids? Yes, this is our family photo. After the veteran gamers obtained the family photo and a detailed map of Winterfell, they entered Winterfell from the nearest gate. Before completing the mission, Not Wearing Pants browsed the forum to check the current situation. Many gamers had entered Winterfell to look for treasures. There were gamers who posted on the forum to earn experience points. Though not wearing pants didn't enter Winterfell, he was able to understand the situation in Winterfell from the posts. Not wearing pants was right. He got to know the situation in Winterfell after browsing through the forum. A group of ancient gods believers appeared in Winterfell. Using the teleport portal reception hall as their origin, many of the believers streamed out continuously. The believers consisted of gnomes, orcs, and werewolves that were very different from the strange ancient gods' army. No matter what, they were monsters, and that required caution. Not wearing pants had to complete the rescue mission and not the killing of the boss mission, so it would be beneficial to evade the boss. After formulating their strategy, the gamers followed the mission tips and set out for the kindergarten, Winterfell Gangleader Kindergarten. There was chaos, fresh blood, and bodies filled with grotesque wounds. In the camp at the northern part of Winterfell, an intense battle raged. The hasty formation made by hundreds of gamers was dispersed by the 1,000 charging ancient gods believers. After that was a wave of massacre. The gamers had an unyielding trait and an unlimited number of revivals from the rune mana formation. The ancient gods believers had only killed the first wave of gamers. The gamers who wanted to fire the magic cannons were prohibited by the system. The mana usage of a magic cannon shot was equivalent to the gamers reviving 10 times. Since the battle didn't require them to be revived 10 times, it wasn't beneficial to use the magic cannons. Moreover, the cannon shots would damage the equipment on the ground. To the gamers, the 3 intact magic cannons were in the prohibited condition. The gamers felt it was a shame that they couldn't fire the cannons. After Dragonborn revived for the 3rd time, he wielded a short sword and fought all the way to the location where he perished. The Winterfell garrison guard captain's long sword was on the ground. It wasn't easy for him to obtain a piece of superior equipment. If he were to lose it, it would be painful for him. Dragonborn stabbed an exhausted orc to death. Then he did a roll and evaded a werewolf's attack. He recovered from the roll beside the piece of superior equipment. He picked up the long sword and wielded both swords at the charging orc. However, he was stabbed to death by Takeaspirhit's pike from behind. Dragonborn stood up. The battle was coming to a close. The ancient gods' believers had dwindled in numbers. With heavy casualties, their combat power became very weak. Chapter 193, Scouting for Intelligence. On the battlefield were corpses of 1,000 ancient gods believers. The gamers were salvaging the battlefield happily. A group of gamers was stripping the equipment from the ancient gods believers. Most of the equipment was green excellent equipment, but the quality was varying, unlike the Winterfell's standard equipment, which was like school uniforms that had a fixed quality. Some gamers were unfortunate to obtain white standard equipment. Shucks, 3 pieces of white standard equipment? Are the ancient gods believers that poor? Take a spear hit through the equipment to the ground. It wasn't easy for him to bring back the 3 pieces of equipment, and they looked cool, but they were white standard equipment. This was no longer a matter of luck. He felt he was being blacklisted by the gamer producers. I have a piece of white standard equipment. Sealhead Ling Chong consoled him. But you have 2 pieces of superior equipment. Seal, you're inhumane. Take a spear hit shouted at Sealhead Ling Chong. Dragonborn watched both of them bicker. Then someone shouted from nearby, all the guild leaders, please come for a war conference. Who's our guild leader? Take a spear hit asked. Gosh, you don't know who our guild leader is? Sealhead Ling Chong said, slapping Takeaspirhit's head. Wait a moment, let me check the guild website. Sealhead Ling Chong was taken aback. He looked at Dragonborn and said, the guild leader is you. Me? Dragonborn was stunned. Dragonborn had unwittingly become the guild leader of Springfield Flower Kindergarten. The original guild leader was employed by Dragon Raja's guild leader because he was very capable. So the previous guild leader brought his loyalists over to Dragon Raja and passed the guild leader position to Dragonborn. Dragonborn became the guild leader of the 30-member guild and attended the war conference. The contents of the war conference weren't complex. Those guild leaders who were good at writing posted the details of the war plan on the forum. They were surveillance, tempting of the enemy, target confirmation, the siege of the enemy to entice enemy reinforcements, bluffing to full-scale attack, and enticing the enemy to attack into deep territory type of tactics. A total of 36 tactics and tens of war plans were posted. To the guild leaders, this kind of war was too simple. But it was a good beginning. Each guild leader gathered the gamers under their guild. As for other gamers, they would be asked to join in. For the gamers who weren't interested, there was no point in forcing them. After a series of discussions, they decided to act according to Leatherbear's suggestion to scout for enemy intelligence. Cruel Malevolence sat outside the Winterfell teleport portal main hall. The teleport portals behind him were still open, but the number of believers that came out from the portals had dwindled. They had about 10,000 believers, which were gathered from locations near Winterfell. To prepare for the return of the ancient gods to the Underworld, they made ample preparations. With the opportunity of the time and space gap at Ancient Ruins number 85, the ancient gods' army enticed all the Underworld's troops and controlled most of the dungeon lords and representatives, including some noble devils. Most of the combat power of the other dungeons was focused on the front line and for the repair of the time and space gap. Cruel Malevolence imagined that once he occupied Winterfell, which was to become the ancient god's stronghold, he would invade the northern underworld and become the new superior devil. He would be the great marshal of the ancient god's army and lead the army to cleanse the— Wait, what was that? Cruel Malevolence stood up and looked at the corner of the distant street. A few half-naked gnomes walked towards him. And there was a Houndhead man. Who would expect Winterfell to have Houndhead men? They were neither fearful nor affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. Were they believers of the ancient gods? Cruel Malevolence couldn't be sure whether a Houndhead man could be a believer, but once they got close, he was sure they weren't believers. Capture them, Cruel Malevolence ordered. This was the third wave, and they were unaffected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. The gnomes who came to Winterfell the 2 previous times were tortured to death. But they would be happily chatting while being tortured. They also mentioned, strange encounter mission, modeling is realistic, AI interactivity is awesome, and death being slow. Cruel Malevolence felt he was being looked down upon. Those half-naked gnomes and Houndhead men would be captured immediately. They didn't resist. When captured, they would chat enthusiastically. Gosh, I'm exhausted. Finally, I've arrived. Bro, why aren't you salvaging equipment? Why are you here trying to trigger the strange encounter mission? Yes, Leather Bear triggered a strange encounter mission and her reputation level upgraded by a level. She also received other miscellaneous rewards. So I want to scout for intelligence too. 666, fortunately, it's all AI. The game is free and making losses. At least, you're making good progress in the game. Why are you laughing? Aren't you making progress in the game? A few gnomes and a Houndhead man chatted jovially. Cruel Malevolence raised his hand and killed the Houndhead man, whom he thought had the lowest intelligence. He didn't give the Houndhead man a chance to speak. The gnomes were shocked. They looked at the werewolf for a long time before a gnome laughed out loud. DMN, this is cracking me up. Is this game that realistic? Is the NPC discriminating against the Houndhead man? The gnome had just finished laughing when he was killed by Cruel Malevolence. 2 gnomes started laughing too while the rest tried to restrain their laughs while maintaining their expressions of suffering. A gnome smiled and shouted, DMN, I'm too tickled. What kind of an AI has the coder monkey coded? Gosh, it's so realistic. Isn't that immersive? Being killed for laughing out loud? Ha 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 ha. The 2 laughing gnomes were also killed immediately. If Cruel Malevolence didn't have fur, the gamers would have noticed his grave face turning green. After 4 gamers were killed, the other gamers restrained themselves. Who are you? Why are you immune to the murmurs of the ancient gods? Cruel Malevolence asked fiercely. It's mana. I don't know mana, a gnome said. Wrong. According to the forum, it shouldn't be said like this. A gnome tried to correct another gnome but was killed by Cruel Malevolence. A few gnomes tried to restrain themselves from laughing, and their faces turned from green to red. It was difficult for the gnomes not to laugh. DMN, I can't control it anymore. We agreed to scout for intelligence and obtain the strange encounter mission and rewards, but you kept making me laugh. And the silly NPC doesn't allow us to laugh. Why doesn't he just give the information to us? Ha ha ha, he was killed after laughing. The rest of the gnomes couldn't help laughing and were killed. Cruel Malevolence's hands and mouth were stained with fresh blood. He was so infuriated that he was about to have a stroke, but before he recovered, another group of gnomes ran towards him. Like before, they weren't wearing any clothes. When the gnomes got close, they raised both their hands to surrender. Cruel Malevolence shouted, "Kill all of them." Chapter 194. Cruel Malevolence's Determination. Cruel Malevolence killed all the gnomes, goblins, and houndhead men that he saw. But these creatures were like pests that infested the entire place. At every interval, a group of half-naked creatures would run to him and shout various things. "Don't kill me. I promise I won't laugh, ha 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 ha. I can't help it. DMN. We trained for so long not to laugh." All were killed by Cruel Malevolence. Cruel Malevolence felt he was insulted by the same group of creatures. They would run to him half-naked and ask to be captured. After being captured, they would defect and claim to be ancient gods' believers, but they weren't believers. They even tried to obtain information from him. The most despicable thing about them was that they spoke nonsense, then they would laugh hysterically. Even if their comrades were killed and Cruel Malevolence used the most sadistic methods against them, they couldn't stop laughing. Those, ha 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 ha, laughs were like ridicule against Cruel Malevolence's ignorance. Why were they not afraid of death? Did he not kill a few hundred of them? Why were they immune to the murmurs of the ancient gods? Was it really Mana? Why did the 1,000 believers not return? Cruel Malevolence was worried about the 1,000 ancient gods' believers, but there was no news. Cruel Malevolence couldn't help thinking that they had perished. Wait, could those creatures who were always laughing and wanted to be captured be bait that released false information? Perhaps there were 20,000 enemy troops instead of 2,000. Cruel Malevolence became more worried. Logically, there shouldn't be 20,000 enemy reinforcements near Winterfell. However, the numerous creatures that came to be killed made Cruel Malevolence very anxious. The worry was short-lived. The gamers tried many times to obtain information, but it was in vain. Besides seeing the countless believers occupying the teleport portal main hall, there was no other intelligence. Planning and strategies were discussed on the forum for tens of pages without any conclusion. The keyboard warriors' tactics were just empty theories. Finally, Dragonborn couldn't control himself and said, "Why don't we attack directly? Why don't we use the 3-step combat strategy and finish the battle?" Everyone was taken aback, but they decided to give it a try. They gathered 1,000 volunteers for this combat legion. The rear included hundreds of longbow and shortbow archers. The first row consisted of shield-wielding gamers, and the second row consisted of pikemen. They looked like a formidable legion. However, their numbers were far inferior to the ancient gods' believers in the Winterfell teleport portal main hall. Cruel Malevolence saw that the enemy was attacking, so he gathered his forces and attacked preemptively. The archers opposite the street attacked with arrows, but they weren't familiar with the bows. They could have fired 2 volleys, but they only managed a single volley. On top of that, most of the shots were off target, with only a small portion of the arrows causing some damage. The gamers miscalculated the running speed of the ancient gods' believers and weren't versed in the range of the bows. It wasn't practical to expect the gamers to master archery in this short time. The ancient gods' believers charged at them. Cruel Malevolence saw that it was a one-sided massacre and smiled cruelly. Yes, massacre, bloodshed, and grotesque deaths. The battle ended in less than an hour. They only suffered slight casualties, but the ancient gods' believers were shocked by the 1,000 gamers who could move freely even though they were subjected to the murmurs of the ancient gods. All the gamers were eventually annihilated. Cruel Malevolence waved his hand. He decided to lead 2,000 of the ancient gods' believers to attack the camp located at the northern gate. If the 1,000 gamers were the last batch of resistance, then Cruel Malevolence would be able to exterminate the despicable laughing goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. The group of ancient gods' believers set off immediately. On the way, they encountered the strange goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. They would ransack chests, counters, and trash cans. Each of them was laden with equipment. They would also drag the Winterfell inhabitants who were trapped in the nightmare into small alleys, the side of the streets, or the shops. When they saw the 2,000 ancient gods' believers, they weren't afraid. They would even gather and watch while shouting. "Gosh, the NPC Legion is attacking." Posted on the forum. "A new wave of benefits and equipment is coming." Shucks. Is that the commander of the ancient gods' believers mentioned on the forum? Yes, that's the werewolf. The strange encounter NPC. The goblins and gnomes were captured and tortured to death, but they were still smiling merrily. There were some gnomes who hid in the shops and fired arrows at Cruel Malevolence and his troops. Cruel Malevolence didn't understand why they weren't counting their blessings when he didn't attack them. Instead, they revealed their locations by jumping out. Some even shot arrows at him. Cruel Malevolence captured the gnome that was hidden in the shop. He ignored the gnome's ugly face and strangled his throat viciously. Why did you shoot the arrows at me? If you stayed hidden, you wouldn't die. Tell me the reason. Why? The gnome was suffocating, and his bones cracked, but he smiled and said, "Wow. The game interactivity is so awesome. I thought they were bluffing. I'll create a post on the forum after I die." Then the gnome perished. Ah! Cruel Malevolence wailed in pain and led the ancient gods' believers to charge in the direction of the northern gate. He had to kill all of them. In Winterfell, which was shrouded in grey mana, a tall figure wasn't affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. He walked on the street and stared at a 3-story building. This was a location far away from the Dungeon Core main hall and the Dungeon Lord main hall. Compared to other places where there were nightmare-infected inhabitants, there was nobody around. Sherlock stood in front of the building. He pinched his chin as he walked one round and muttered, "This should be the place." "Lord Sherlock, why didn't you join in the exciting battle and do some plot killings and plot animation? Instead, you're wandering around in Winterfell for such a long time? What are you looking for? Are you looking for the Winterfell Bank?" Brew asked, puzzled. Finding the source, Sherlock said, "There are so many ancient gods believers in Winterfell, and even the Dungeon Core was corrupted. I don't believe that the sealed ancient gods have the power to affect the Underworld." "You are saying that someone planned everything?" Brew asked. "That's right. The murmurs of the ancient gods didn't appear initially at the Dungeon Core. If it originally started in Winterfell, the believers wouldn't make the abandoned sewers their stronghold or excavate the sewers to create their base." Sherlock walked up to the building and placed his hand on the door. He said, "Using the time and space gap of ancient ruins number 85 to connect the location of the ancient god's army, they enticed all the troops of the dungeons to the time and space gap. Then they occupied the Winterfell Dungeon Core. I suspect that it wasn't an accident for the gap to occur at ancient ruins number 85. It was pre-planned. They pushed all the blame on the Black Dragon's appearance. Even without the dragon, they would use other reasons to create the false impression of an accident to prevent suspicion. Oh, this is a long-term plan. The creature who was able to open up the time and space gap and spread the murmurs of the ancient gods must be extremely powerful," Brew said thoughtfully. "Who knows?" Mana ripples emanated from Sherlock's hand. The mana shield on the outside of the building rippled twice and vanished, and Sherlock opened the main door and entered briskly. Chapter 195. I feel you are timid. Cruel Malevolence felt he hadn't awakened from his sleep, so he was feeling emotional. Not long before, he was still standing at the teleport portal reception hall, imagining himself as a dungeon lord in a transformed superior devil with pus-filled blisters. Soon, he was harassed incessantly by many goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. They weren't affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods, and they spoke like nutcases. When 1,000 fully armed creatures who weren't affected by the ancient gods appeared and were killed, the ego of Cruel Malevolence exploded. He charged towards the location of the Winterfell Northern Gate with 2,000 of his troops. Then there were none. In the camp, Cruel Malevolence scorned the green-skinned creatures and houndhead men who couldn't even operate the magic cannons. He charged and annihilated all of them. He thought he had seen the last of them and would be spared from listening to their laughs and nonsense. From the airship, numerous green-skinned creatures who were half-naked smiled, grabbed their weapons, and attacked. Were they reinforcements? Perhaps, but Cruel Malevolence would just kill them as usual. The second wave came and was killed. The third wave, wiped out. The fourth wave, destroyed. The fifth wave. Something wasn't right. The airship looked huge, but it was only reasonable for accommodating 3,000 to 4,000 creatures. How could it accommodate that many creatures? He had encountered at least 10,000 creatures. Like torrential waves, the continuous streams of half-naked green-skinned creatures wore down the ancient gods' believers. Cruel Malevolence noticed something wasn't right. After slashing a goblin, Cruel Malevolence started to retreat while fending off his enemies. He intended to escape the battlefield. The green-skinned creatures charged at him excitedly. They knew that the werewolf in superior equipment was the commander. Cruel Malevolence fled with his werewolves, who had fast running speed. They escaped, leaving the orcs behind to be engulfed by the endless stream of green-skinned creatures. He heard them shouting, "Chase after them! The boss is escaping! Don't chase the boss! We can't catch up with them! Kill the monsters! They have equipment! Aim for the legs! What are the archers doing? Shoot at the legs! DMN! Which archer hit me? I'm shot!" After that, Cruel Malevolence escaped and no longer heard any shouts. He returned to the Winterfell teleport portal main hall with the hundreds of panting werewolves. Then he organized his defenses. Before the Winterfell dungeon core transformed, he had to guard the teleport portals, which were the only way for his troops to arrive. However, the rate of replacement of his believers was inferior to those of the green-skinned creatures. He was no longer relaxed. He was sure that the creatures outside the northern gate were inexperienced, but they were fearless, in large numbers, and unaffected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. If he wasn't confident that they were non-believers, Cruel Malevolence would have believed he was fighting against the ancient gods' army. Cruel Malevolence didn't expect that the streaming green-skinned creatures would charge at him when he had only just returned. Cruel Malevolence grasped his weapon tightly. No matter what, he had to persist and defeat these terrible green-skinned creatures. For the ancient gods. When the gamers and the ancient gods' believers were embroiled in combat, the veteran gamers had arrived at Winterfell Gangleader Kindergarten, according to the map. They looked for Yoda's kids based on the family photo. This wasn't a difficult task. Yoda's kids had permed hair, large gold chains, and dragon and tiger tattoos, so they were extremely prominent. The main point was that their hairstyles were prominent. The gamers found Yoda's 20 kids and arranged for them to be carried back, receiving a card with 100,000 magic stones from Yoda's wife. The 20 small gnomes had recovered quite a bit from the effects of the ancient gods. The veteran gamers completed the series of missions easily and returned to the camp. That was when they saw the gamers pursuing Cruel Malevolence's troops and salvaging equipment on the battlefield. From the forum, they got to know that there was another wave of attack from the monsters, one led by the most powerful werewolf boss. The boss was beaten back, and he retreated to the teleport portal main hall. After the veteran gamers submitted the magic stone card to the rune mana formation, they joined in the battle against the boss. It was the same tactic as fighting Kramer. They would kill the minions before attacking Cruel Malevolence. Then the equipment on the boss would be auctioned. The large trident that shot down the airship was still stored in the warehouse. Simba accidentally divulged that the trident would only be reforged once the large furnace was ready. Incited by the prospect of obtaining Cruel Malevolence's equipment, the gamers were in high morale. They launched another fierce attack at the Winterfell teleport portal main hall. Sherlock walked into a dark room, his superior eyesight allowing him to see clearly. A large rune mana formation was placed in the middle of the room, and the walls were filled with symbols and imprints of strange evil gods. Seems like this is the original stronghold of the ancient gods' believers. Sherlock squatted down and examined the rune mana formation carefully. These runes look expensive. Tisk, tisk. I didn't expect the ancient gods' believers to be richer than us, Bruce said sarcastically. Because someone is sponsoring them, Sherlock said as he stood up. He turned and looked behind him. A figure with an octopus face was behind Sherlock. That was Octopus Ball. Sherlock? Octopus Ball looked at Sherlock and said maliciously, "Why didn't you lie down over there like the other dungeon lords? Then I can torture you slowly." "So, it's you?" Sherlock was shocked. "Is that strange? Sherlock, if you kneel down and plead for mercy, I will ask the ancient gods for leniency." "I guess a superior devil won't obtain leniency though. The ancient gods hated the new superior devils like you. I will replace your position in the future. I'm the real superior devil." Octopus Ball looked crazed, the tentacles on his chin waving menacingly. "It's pretty strange," Sherlock pondered and said, "during our school days, I thought you were timid. I didn't expect you to do such things. Honestly, I'm changing my opinion of you." A powerful mana filled the entire room, followed by a loud booming sound. It felt like a strong wind had torn the room into shreds. The original three-story house had become a pile of ruins. Sherlock stood intact on the pile of ruins. In front of him was the transforming Octopus Ball. Die, Sherlock. Chapter 196. It hasn't ended. Cruel Malevolence had never fought such a sullen battle before. He was once a courageous and capable werewolf commander. He was well versed in the three-step battle tactic and had never lost a battle. Even if the enemies were giants, he could lead his troops and defeat them. In order for the ancient gods to descend upon the underworld, he sacrificed a lot. Only he knew the extent of his sacrifices. But today, a group of goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men charged fearlessly in endless streams. Their combat power wasn't strong, but he couldn't fend off the repeated attacks. The number of ancient gods' believers wasn't large to begin with. After less than an hour of battle, the number of ancient gods' believers increased, but the injuries on his body also increased. Though he was strong and could easily kill those green-skinned creatures, they sacrificed their lives in order to inflict wounds on him. Cruel malevolence lost count of the smiling creatures who sacrificed themselves to create a chance for their comrades to injure him. When cruel malevolence was feeling exhausted, he looked at his sides. He didn't see his comrades, only the green-skinned creatures who gazed at him fanatically. They were ugly and had green words above their heads. Even if their comrades were killed, they didn't bother to take a look. They only looked at him. Cruel malevolence knelt down while bearing his injuries. He vomited blood and looked at the green-skinned creatures as they howled and swarmed over him. Ding! The gamers have completed the phase mission. Occupied teleport portal main hall. Please escort Brainiac to shut down the teleport portals and connect the portals to Eternal Kingdom. Triggered the next phase mission. Mission title: Occupy the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. Mission description: We cut off the teleport portals of the ancient gods' believers. It's time to shut down the Winterfell anti-mana shield and clear the path for the airship. For Eternal Kingdom, mission reward: grab whatever you see if you can carry it. Dragonborn looked at the large werewolf as he stabbed him to death. The werewolf fell to the ground. The black-armored Arthur glanced at Dragonborn and retrieved his weapon. Then, he followed the veteran gamers to the Dungeon Lord main hall located deep within Winterfell. Gosh, you're good. Take a spear hit patted Dragonborn's shoulders and said, "You're very strong. Arthur seems to be inferior to you. What shall we do with the commander's equipment?" Sealhead Ling Chong asked a practical question. He had just finished asking when a system notice appeared before their eyes. The werewolf commander's equipment will be auctioned in Eternal Kingdom. Please return the equipment to Eternal Kingdom and receive full service rewards. Gosh, don't think about it. Only the rich can obtain the equipment. Take a spearhead spread out his hands and said with grievances. We'll obtain benefits too. The money obtained from the auctioned equipment will be distributed to all combatants. The more the rich gamers pay, the more we earn. It's only equipment and a few digits. Why are you so concerned? You're right, but I'd like to be as cool as Arthur. Take a spearhead was envious of Arthur. You're trash. Don't you understand the essence of the game? The most important thing is personal capability. Equipment is secondary. Look at Arthur with his superior equipment. Didn't Dragonborn, who has inferior equipment, inflict more damage than Arthur? When fighting the boss, the other gamers didn't last more than 10 seconds, but Dragonborn lasted for a minute and was able to inflict severe damage. That's awesome, Sealhead Ling Chong said with envy. Veteran Arthur's equipment isn't that superior to ours. After 3 months of beta testing, our equipment is only slightly inferior. Don't exaggerate. Veteran Arthur is very strong, Dragonborn quickly said. He's strong, but I feel Dragonborn is stronger. Take a spearhead looked with respect at Dragonborn as he said, "Bro, when we meet offline next time, you'll teach me full armor combat." We'll talk next time, Dragonborn said reluctantly. Let's stop chatting. We'll gather the loot and salvage the dungeon. We'll take the loot of the ancient gods' believers and visit the blacksmith shop. Let's hurry, Sealhead Ling Chong shouted excitedly. Dragonborn and Take a Spear Hit followed Sealhead Ling Chong as they collected the loot. Brainiac, who was in the camp at the northern gate, nodded and looked at the goblins who conveyed the information to him. The green-skinned creatures said, "Lord Sherlock orders you to the teleport portal main hall. You'll connect the Winterfell teleport portals to the coordinates of Eternal Kingdom." Though Brainiac wasn't interested in the battles, he had to follow Lord Sherlock's orders. After packing his things, with the escort of a group of goblins and gnomes, he walked in the direction of the teleport portal main hall. While the gamers were fighting, Sherlock was on a pile of ruins watching Octopus Ball transform. The body of the devil octopus ball had become ugly after being strengthened by the corruption of the ancient gods. His body grew tentacles that had large suction pads. His body expanded as his muscles wiggled and increased in size. He became taller, but his head didn't change. He gave off a strange, unnatural feeling. Sherlock, Sherlock, I'm going to kill you, the devil who always bottomed the examinations. Octopus Ball roared, and his voice changed. Lord Sherlock, what is the connection between your examination results and your feud with him? Brew asked curiously. I don't know. Sherlock pondered for a while. What's that? Brew asked, bewildered. It's nothing, just a personal interest. Sherlock looked at the fully transformed octopus ball. Then he walked to him and clenched his fists. Sherlock, I'm going to kill, ooh. Octopus Ball raised his arms that were growing tentacles. He shouted excitedly as Sherlock walked forward and delivered a punch to his stomach. Sherlock's fist landed on Octopus Ball's stomach. The surrounding muscles wanted to block Sherlock's power, but they disintegrated as the fist's power swirled and focused on a spot before exploding violently. Boom! Octopus Ball flew out and created ditches as he slid along the ground. After knocking into many buildings, he stopped in a pile of debris. Has it ended? Brew asked. No. Sherlock walked towards the pile of debris. Chapter 197. Our luck is really good. In the pile of debris, there was a bundle of flesh that belonged to a creature. More than half of the body was buried in the debris, with 2 legs sticking out. Half of the body melted, and it was emitting green smoke while it convulsed. Under normal circumstances, it would be a confirmed death. But Octopus Ball didn't die. His flesh healed rapidly. As Sherlock walked slowly towards him, Octopus Ball moved his convulsing body and pushed away a large pile of debris. Octopus Ball's body was full of tentacles, though the face looked faintly like his own. You've sold your soul and flesh to the ancient gods. Sherlock walked in front of Octopus Ball, who slowly stood up and grew larger. Tisk, tisk, he looks disgusting. Lord Sherlock, you have the courage to beat up such a disgusting creature. I'm in awe of you, Brew said. Octopus Ball should have a way to connect directly to the ancient gods. Lord Sherlock, do you think that Octopus Ball will become a superior devil with the help of the ancient gods? I don't know, I didn't do any research. Sherlock shook his head. Octopus Ball had already stood up. Sherlock felt quaking underneath his legs. Pom, pom, pom. Numerous tentacles broke out from the ground underneath Sherlock's legs. Each tentacle was as thick as a giant, and they wrapped tightly around Sherlock. Octopus Ball dragged his immense body and walked to the group of tentacles that were tens of meters tall. He clenched his fist as he enjoyed the feeling of controlling the tentacles. He could feel Sherlock's bones being crushed by his great strength. Before long, the smell of burning came from the tentacles, and sizzling sounds were heard. From top to bottom, tens of mana formations appeared around the tentacles. Then, the tentacles burst into flames after a violent explosion. The tentacles wiggled and released their hold while being swallowed by the flames. They were burnt to ash. When the flames extinguished, the emotionless Sherlock was left standing with his burnt tuxedo. Is there anything else? Are you only able to enlarge your small tentacles to large tentacles? Octopus Ball was dumbstruck when he saw the intact Sherlock. After a moment, he shook in shame before laughing loudly. Ha 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 ha. Ooh. Before he completed his laugh, he was punched in the stomach by the charging Sherlock. This time, Octopus Ball wasn't sent flying. Sherlock's fist stuck to Octopus Ball's stomach while Octopus Ball's legs were lifted off the ground. Then, Sherlock changed the direction of his fist as his body inclined forward. His fist was in a hook position while a series of mana formations appeared on Sherlock's wrist. Strengthen. His strengthened fist hooked onto Octopus Ball's stomach as Octopus Ball was smashed onto the ground. Boom, boom, boom. With Sherlock and Octopus Ball as the origin, the ground cracked open, and fissures snaked out like spider webs. Sherlock stood up and looked down at the pool of blood that was seeping into the cracked ground. Let's go and take over the dungeon core. Sherlock turned and walked towards the dungeon core main hall. Meanwhile, the gamers charged wildly into the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. The ancient gods' believers guarding the hall were unable to provide any resistance. With 2,000 gamers charging in like floodwater, who could survive such a calamity? The ancient gods' believers weren't like the ancient gods' army that had endless streams of attacks. The believers were raised up as underworld natives who weren't accepted by the mainstream inhabitants. Hence, there weren't many of them. The first thing that the gamers did wasn't shutting off the anti-mana shield. How would they know about the shield? Their priority was to look for loot. Though they didn't know what items were valuable, they went for the equipment first. Then they went for things like wooden chests and furniture. Once the Winterfell teleport portals were connected to Eternal Kingdom, their efficiency in clearing out the Dungeon Lord main hall became higher. They carried their loot directly to the teleport portal main hall and returned to Eternal Kingdom. The situation was a bit out of control. After Brainiac set the coordinates of the teleport portals to Eternal Kingdom, he walked without emotion to the Dungeon Lord main hall. Lord Sherlock was conveying instructions to him via the green-skinned creatures. He was to shut off the anti-mana shield. As a lich, he wasn't affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods. The living and the dead had a fundamental difference, just like the spirit world and the underworld. Brainiac stood at the teleport portal main hall entrance. He looked at the green-skinned creatures, who could revive an unlimited number of times, as they transported various pieces of equipment and furniture. There was a group of gamers carrying a devil with an unknown status. That was definitely not a superior devil. Wait a moment, what are you doing? Brainiac asked as he stopped the gamers who were carrying the devil. We're unable to strip his equipment. We'll carry him to Eternal Kingdom first, one of the gamers explained to Brainiac. Though the devils and underworld inhabitants were trapped in the nightmare, it didn't mean they wouldn't wake up. The situation was under control by Eternal Kingdom. Brainiac had no objections to looting, but abducting a devil lord was too much. What if the devil was sent to Eternal Kingdom and then woke up? How was he going to explain that to Sherlock? In order to prevent a diplomatic conflict, Brainiac examined the equipment and discovered the seal binding the equipment. He spent some time to dispel the seal before saying, "You may strip the equipment now." The gamers were taken aback by Brainiac's actions. The gamers tried to remove the devil's breastplate, and it was successful. As long as they could strip the equipment, the gamers would do it. They immediately stripped all the devils of their equipment and threw them aside. Brainiac looked at the leaving gamers, who were extremely happy, and then walked towards the Dungeon Lord main hall. When Brainiac walked into the Dungeon Lord main hall, all the devils who were trapped in the nightmare were naked. The critical areas were covered with mosaic. Besides equipment, the gamers also looted the furniture. The gamers also went for the tuxedos in the closets, kitchenware, some practical tools, magical items, and scrolls. They looted everything that looked valuable, regardless of its function. The gamers were extremely efficient. Before long, the 2,000 gamers cleared the Dungeon Lord main hall. Brainiac was in the mana control room of the Dungeon Lord main hall, where he found the magic chargers for the anti-mana shield. It was a floating crystal ball within the magical machines. The gamers watched Brainiac at work as they thought it was a plot animation. After Brainiac finished shutting down the shield, the gamers asked, "Has it ended?" "It has ended." Brainiac nodded. The gamers were dumbfounded. They charged in and carried off the magic machines and the crystal ball. They said, "Gosh, our luck is really good. We triggered the hidden mission while watching plot animation." Chapter 198. Prepare to fire the cannons. In the camp at the Winterfell Northern Gate, Yoda was on the airship, watching the gamers as they transported the equipment to Winterfell. According to them, they were transporting the loot back to Eternal Kingdom via the teleport portals. It was an eye-opener for Yoda. From what he heard from Moros, the citizens of Eternal Kingdom could revive endlessly due to Lord Sherlock's power. They were fearless legendary warriors. Yoda thought Moros was bluffing. He saw the green-skinned creatures covered in blood, but they were without fear. During the Area Number 10 battle campaign, he saw the courageous goblin who was laden with bladders, but he was skeptical of the creatures having unlimited revivals. Was Lord Sherlock the Hades Lord? Or the son of the Hades Lord? Even the Hades Lord wouldn't allow that many creatures to have unlimited revivals. Today, Yoda witnessed the unlimited revivals of Sherlock's warriors. He decided that once he returned to Eternal Kingdom, he would apologize to Moros. He sat in the airship, looking blankly at the gamers carrying the loot. A goblin who was laden with bladders ran to him. "Yoda, fly the airship to bomb the Winterfell dungeon core. The anti-mana shield is gone." The gamers who were carrying the loot below started shouting. Make haste. Find some houndhead men or gnomes to operate the magic cannons. Wait a moment. Where did you obtain the information? Brainiac just entered Winterfell. I don't think he can send the information back that fast. Yoda was taken aback and quickly asked. There's no time to waste. Forum? We have a special way to obtain information. Prepare to take off. We'll talk once we arrive at Winterfell. The goblin that was equipped with bladders looked very excited. Previously, Yoda wouldn't listen to the nonsense of such fools, but the goblin before him was called Veteran Hemp Rope. He wasn't a normal goblin but a genius. Most of the design of the airship was created by Veteran Hemp Rope. Though he always said, "It's not me, it's a group effort on the forum." Yoda took up his post at the helm. The large airship magical core activated and made buzzing sounds. 200 houndhead men, gnomes, and some goblins ran up to the airship. It took off while everyone cheered. Gosh, wait for me, I haven't boarded the ship. The gamers on the ship shouted towards the gamers below. Too bad, the ship has taken off. We're not bringing you. Hurry and transport the equipment. We're going for a ride. The gamers below started shooting arrows at the airship. The previous lousy archery of the gamers became extremely accurate. All arrows landed on the airship. Some gnomes who were on the deck were even hit. Those shot gnomes disintegrated into glittering mana. Soon after, new gnomes appeared from the rune mana formation. They cursed as they put on their equipment. Below the airship, many gamers committed suicide. Many gamers made use of the rune mana formation to appear on the airship. The green-skinned creatures started chattering. 666, you've done well in order to let the airship make haste towards Winterfell. It's awesome, this free game is losing lots of money. It's hilarious, don't you want your equipment? DMN, I told you to wait for me. Yoda focused his attention on controlling the airship. It was impossible to use logic to understand the green-skinned creatures. The airship arrived in the sky above Winterfell. Yoda steered the airship higher to prevent the gray mana mist from affecting him. The visibility of Winterfell from the sky was low. It was as though a layer of gray clouds was covering the dungeon. At least he was able to see the road ahead. Yoda controlled the airship and flew towards the dungeon core. Sounds of fighting were heard coming from the old district. Then, there were booming sounds and buildings collapsing as huge tentacles broke out from the ground. The gamers didn't want to miss such an exciting scene, so they flocked to the sides of the ship to watch. Is that Sherlock? Where? It's really Sherlock. He's powerful. Who is that big octopus? Should be the previous octopus face who was always against us. Gosh, he's finally part of the instance dungeon. Yoda couldn't understand what the gamers were saying. The battle at Lord Sherlock's location ended after a series of booming sounds. On the road from the Dungeon Lord main hall to the teleport portal main hall, there were many gamers transporting loot. Up in the sky, the gamers looked like a continuous line. The Dungeon Core main hall is straight ahead. Yoda shouted as he looked at the building behind the Dungeon Lord main hall. The gamers looked in the direction pointed out by Yoda. The gray mana shrouding Winterfell became thinner and thinner. To be exact, the gray mana gathered towards the dungeon core. What was the situation? Yoda wasn't sure, and he had an ominous feeling. Prepare to fire the cannons. The magic cannons are now active. The gamers shouted on the deck of the airship. Peasant ran to a magic cannon and said, "Brothers and sisters, let me try firing a cannon. I'll let you have the cannon after trying once." Everyone smiled merrily as Peasant was earnest. There were only 3 magic cannons. They were more than sufficient to bomb a building. Yoda adjusted the airship's position to allow the magic cannons to aim at the dungeon core main hall. The 3 operators of the magic cannons assumed their posts and aimed the barrels at the dungeon core main hall. Prepare, fire. Chapter 199, because we are collaborative partners. The 3 magic cannons on the airship aimed at the dungeon core main hall. After accumulating mana, the magic cannons fired at the dungeon core main hall below. Massive explosions ensued, and towering flames licked the sky. The magic cannons flattened the dungeon core main hall within moments. In the middle of the incinerated ground was a prominent red-hot dungeon core. The surrounding gray mana became thinner and thinner. Sherlock walked on the burnt ground and looked at the huge Winterfell dungeon core. He extended his hand and pressed on it, and Winterfell quaked. I didn't expect that one day I'd be able to swallow the Winterfell dungeon core. What level is the dungeon core? Level 3? Level 4? Brew asked excitedly. I estimate it to be level 4. The gray mana is starting to disperse. Sherlock continued to transfer his mana to the Winterfell dungeon core. Was the place that you destroyed just now the actual stronghold of the ancient gods in Winterfell? Brew asked. No, it should be Octopus Ball. His body was contaminated by the ancient gods to such a degree, I suppose he had even betrayed his soul. After using the Winterfell dungeon core's power, if he couldn't broadcast the murmurs of the ancient gods, then he was really useless, Sherlock said. Tisk, tisk. Lord Sherlock is indeed resourceful to be able to dispose of Lord Octopusball like trash. Lord Sherlock indeed has the makings of a hero, Brew said thoughtfully. Sherlock had the bright red dungeon core in his hand. Soon, Winterfell would descend into darkness when the mana-simulated sunlight vanished. The gamers took some time to adjust to the darkness. Only a few magical vines were providing some illumination. Sherlock had the Winterfell dungeon core firmly in his hand. He extended his bat's wings and took off towards the airship. Sherlock flew in front of the airship while holding the ball-shaped dungeon core. Then, he landed on the bow of the airship and said, "We imprisoned the ancient gods for tens of thousands of years." He walked towards the rune mana formation and exiled the ancient gods from the underworld. Sherlock wrapped the dungeon core with an anti-mana cloth and threw it into the rune mana formation as he said, "They dared to invade our territory. They're tired of living." The gamers cheered wildly. For Eggface. For the cleansing of the world's savior. Awesome, Shirley. Isn't that the dungeon core? Are we going to have the third beta or the open beta? Wah. When Sherlock sent the Winterfell dungeon core to Eternal Kingdom via the rune mana formation, some gamers received missions to bring the dungeon core to Brew's location. In the dark Winterfell, the dungeon lord Onionhead, who was wearing an onion wig, opened his eyes slowly. He saw a goblin with green words taking his wig. The goblin didn't expect Onionhead to wake up. He was taken aback and said, "Bro, you're awake? You have no more equipment in your home." Onionhead saw many goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men in his home. Only Eternal Kingdom had houndhead men as servants. When Onionhead was wondering if he had been robbed by Eternal Kingdom, Lord Sherlock appeared before him and explained solemnly, I saw ancient gods believers broadcasting the murmurs of the ancient gods here. I gathered my servants to rescue Winterfell, but it was too late. Winterfell had already sustained many losses. Sherlock didn't lie. He brought many witnesses like Yoda, Yoda's wife and children, and other dispersed inhabitants on the outskirts of Winterfell. They witnessed Eternal Kingdom flying an airship to Winterfell and fighting with the ancient gods believers at the northern gate. There were various booming and explosion sound effects. After that, the gray mana dissipated. The underworld inhabitants who were affected by the murmurs of the ancient gods were saved. Of course, Winterfell had to pay a price. For example, the Dungeon Lord main hall, equipment shops, and the Winterfell dungeon core were looted. It was a small price for being saved. Wait a moment, the dungeon core is gone? Onionhead grabbed his wig, and his mind went blank. Yes. The ancient gods believers were using the dungeon core to summon the ancient gods. I didn't think you would want the ancient gods to descend upon the underworld, so I had my airship blow the dungeon core to bits. Don't thank me, this is what a righteous dungeon lord should do. Onionhead knew that Sherlock was most likely speaking the truth. Ancient gods believers did appear in Winterfell, and the murmurs of the ancient gods engulfed the entire dungeon. If they didn't use the dungeon core, it wouldn't be possible. Eternal Kingdom waged a difficult battle against the ancient gods believers, and more than tens of thousands of troops perished on the battlefield. Onionhead was overloaded with information and needed time to assimilate it. Sherlock wasn't in a hurry. He patted Onionhead on the shoulders and said, "You have to take notice of internal administration. Later, I'll cooperate with you to investigate. I'll bring the airship back. Yes, I'll calculate the death compensation and military expenses at a later date. Don't worry. I'll give Merchant Alliance a 1% discount because we're collaborative partners." Chapter 200. Interested in watching my mana skills? The battle against the ancient gods ended in victory. The investigation lasted many days. After that, there was an initial investigation report. Sherlock received a copy of it. Battle of Winterfell and Ancient Gods Investigation Report. Senior management of the Merchant Alliance and various dungeon lords. Not long ago, due to mismanagement of Winterfell and outside infiltration, the ancient gods corrupted Winterfell. Finally, after everyone's efforts, especially Eternal Kingdom's great sacrifices, we managed to stop the ancient gods' plot. However, we have to be vigilant. Winterfell decided to restructure the management and strengthen the management and background checks. As one of the dungeon lords of Eternal Fire, Octopus Ball was the incident perpetrator. Though he was destroyed by Lord Sherlock after much effort, he brought great calamity to Winterfell. After losing many excellent warriors, countless pieces of equipment, and a precious dungeon core, the Merchant Alliance will deal appropriately with Eternal Fire for a resolution. Remnants of the ancient gods' believers were still hidden deep within Winterfell. In the following days, we will be. Sherlock put down the report. He was together with some dungeon lords, the Winterfell management, and Dungeon Lord Onionhead. Dungeon lords, the Merchant Alliance has invited you here to thank you for your outstanding contributions in this battle. The Devil Lords braced their chests. Onionhead looked at Sherlock and said, especially Lord Sherlock. Without you and your warriors, we wouldn't be sitting here having this meeting. Sherlock looked at Onionhead's awkward expression and said, it's nothing much. As the neighbor of Winterfell and a collaborative partner of the Merchant Alliance, it's what I should do. But it's a pity for my warriors who shed blood and sacrificed their lives for the battle. Their families will be mourning. After losing their sole breadwinners, they may have to live in hunger. Lord Sherlock, don't worry, your death compensation application has been submitted. The compensation for 20,000 gnomes, 10,000 goblins, and 10,000 Houndhead men will be processed. It's the first time that Houndhead men fought for the Underworld inhabitants, so we don't have precedence for the compensation, Onionhead said with embarrassment. No problem, I can understand your difficulties, Sherlock nodded and said. It was understandable that the efficiency was low for a huge organization like the Merchant Alliance. Next, I'll discuss with all of you the details of the remuneration. Onionhead looked at the various dungeon lords. The remuneration was about magic stones and business benefits. The main points were to assist in creating merchant routes, allowing the sale of dungeons products, free use of the Merchant Alliance's tunnels, and other benefits. Besides that, Sherlock also received other benefits like half a year's logging rights for Underground Forest No. 3, which was proposed by Sherlock. The Merchant Alliance agreed without much hesitation since they thought Sherlock wouldn't be able to cut down many trees. Were those trees able to be cut by normal creatures? Without being severely decadent, there was no way to get close to the trees. Sherlock was also compensated for the equipment damaged during the battle. Winterfell was now without a dungeon core. With the Merchant Alliance being the largest merchant organization in the Underworld, it wasn't a problem to obtain a level 4 dungeon core, though it would require some effort. The transportation issue in Winterfell became a problem. There was no energy source for the teleport portals, so everyone had to depend on primitive methods for transport. When Sherlock returned to Eternal Kingdom from Winterfell, he used the airship, which required only 1 day's journey. After the meeting in Winterfell, Sherlock returned to Eternal Kingdom. Everyone in the dungeon was celebrating as if there was a festival because of how greatly they had profited. Each gamer had about 4 to 5 sets of spare equipment. The private land of each gamer was limited. Even if 100 gamers bought 100 square meters of land and built a multi-story building, each gamer would only have 10 square meters of private space. Besides placing a bed, the rest of the space was stuffed with equipment. Though it was crowded, it was blissful. As long as the gamers were happy. When Sherlock returned to Eternal Kingdom, the gamers were packing their loot. The carcass of the huge python was coiled and placed at the plaza. Many gamers were using their weapons to cut the meat. The gamers gathered around Sherlock, not wanting to miss any plot animation. They followed Sherlock to the Dungeon Lord main hall before dispersing. Sherlock opened the main door and looked at the site of the Dungeon Lord main hall. There were 3 beds and a nest, and 3 hamsters and a small dragon. What, I missed out on such exciting events? It's a pity that a king of darkness like me was unable to participate in the battle and instill fear, Eggface said as he finished the bloody chrysanthemum tea in a jar. Then he saw Sherlock at the door and greeted him warmly. Ah, my eternal foe, he spoke as he walked to the shelf and grabbed a tea box. He then poured the bloody chrysanthemum tea leaves into the jar and started brewing the tea. The 3 hamster noticed Sherlock and quickly jumped down. They started speaking immediately. Lord Sherlock, we've finally found you. Our lady is looking for you. Why did Lord Sherlock set up a dungeon here? Did you forget the agreement with Our Lady? The dungeon's clay is delicious. Eggface blinked his eyes as he looked on and kept quiet. In regards to this, Sherlock clenched his fist and raised it from his back. Are you interested in watching my mana skills?